All right, we'll wait till everybody settles in, and we'll start this. I think it would be best if we started with a welcome from the newest station manager of WCWP, Pete Bellotti.
Thank you, Dan. Hall of Fame is my favorite time of the year. Just seeing the history, 60 years here at WCWP, and all the people that we have here today. And to our class, our 2022 class, thank you for your dedication to the broadcasting business and to WCWP. I, along with the students here, are very grateful for your service and congratulate you very much. The state of WCWP is strong. 1 year ago, we had a lot of questions, but now the future is in focus and bright. From a programming standpoint, we've added 15 hours of student content to our FM brand, and more is on the way. Our student staff, alumni, and community volunteers are second to none, and thank you to all of them for their dedication. I truly appreciate all who have stuck with us during the transition, and I hope to be with you for many years to come. Now, without any further ado, let's hear from Dan as we induct our first inductee, John Mullen.
Before I induct John, I have a few acknowledgments. First, the dean of the school that we all work under, and that's Maureen Tuthill. Where's Maureen? Right back there. And I have two personal messages that were sent to me in the last day or so. One from Bobby G, who regrets not being able to be here today, but congratulates all the inductees. He sends his love. And from Mark Snyder, who, you know the way Snyder talks, oh shit, I'm gonna miss it. I wanted to see Roger. And because he had things to do also. So I wanted to make sure I got that in before we got started. Our first inductee, well, I'm looking at the inductee list, and boy, the 80s kicked it this year, didn't they? The 80s kicked it. I got married in the 80s. I had 2 children in the 80s. I had 2 children in the 90s. I went to school in the 80s. I knew a lot of these people. This is terrific. I'm very happy. I was also very honored to be the chairperson of the committee that found all of you. It was a great process. I know Suzanne was part of the process. Dan Reagan was part of the process. The fact that they're in this year has nothing to do with they were on the committee, and that's not how it worked. It's a very good process, and it's been changed, and it'll stay this way going forward. So we make sure that we honor everybody in the right time and in the right period. So let me start with my friend John. I could go on and on about John. As a student, John was always that guy who would take the extra work, the extra tape shift, Mozer and your damn tape shifts. There was no automation system, so he had to sit. You know, there had to be an operator on duty 24 hours a day. Although we did go off at 3 a.m. most days. He ran the...
Then we went to cassettes.
And then we went, oh, yeah. He mentions that. Those were real pieces of shit, Mozer. You know that, right? He ran the on-air board, often playing tapes, cassettes of community volunteers, pre-recorded talk shows, many summers, winter breaks, and basically what no one else wanted to. I don't know why you did that. Sounds boring, but as John has said, it was necessary to keep us on the air. And that's really important to John and to everyone else in this business, staying on the air. John also served as a student manager and program director at WCWP, and in his letter to the committee, he wrote, "I'll let others decide whether I was good at that or not." John often learned the hard way at WCWP. There are many stories I could tell you, but I'm going to share one. John learned a valuable lesson in chain of command. Yeah, John just said, oh, God. Apparently, you should not put an ad in the Pioneer asking the following question. Does 53 Campus Radio steal tests and read the answers on the air? Listen and find out. Well, Dean Julian Mates was not pleased. But he was very kind to John. He explained that marketing ideas should be approved by upper management, Mozer, as first, especially when your federal work study, which John was under, His employment job is operating a ditto machine where copying tests before they were handed out by professors is your job. Lesson learned. His professional career is a tour of New York City, essentially. First stop, WNEWAM, where he worked in the programming department with veteran program director Quincy McCoy. He moved on positions at WPLJ, where he worked under Scott Shannon, which is a blessing to anyone who was in the business in those days. His next stop was Hot 97 as a research supervisor, where he worked with Frank Imonetti, right? Yep, Imonetti, who helped him get the gig, and he worked under PD Joel Salkowitz. Now, this can only be considered a diversity job. You got this because of your diversity, John. He was recruited by Inner City Broadcasting for WBLS FM. Now, if anybody's known John's, as you can see right, he's bright red. He's the whitest human being I've ever met in my life. He served as research director, assistant program director, this is the best part, and interim program director for a year at WBLS. Before DEI was a thing, John. All right? At WBLS, he was mentored by Frankie Crocker, again, another amazing experience, as well as legendary broadcasters Hal Jackson and Vaughn Harper. John also worked with Grandmaster Flash when he was there. And I hear you had a good experience with the great, what was his name? Elijah Muhammad? You had a real experience with him one day? We can't tell that story, apparently. Hot 97 recruited him back because he needed the money in 1996. And when his parent company, MS, bought, remember this station, WQCD? They promoted him to the program director of Smooth Jazz CD 101, where he worked with WCWP alum Mike Navarro. Now, CD 101 I can see. WBLS, not so much, John. In 2000, he became the operations manager of WQCD and KISS FM. During this time, he had a really great intern from WCWP, one of my favorite people from that era, a young lady named Erica Soto, who was a terrific production director when she was here. In 2004, John had had enough of New York radio. He wanted to transition into higher education, and he joined WRHU Hofstra as the operations manager under Bruce Avery. Good man we recently lost, if you don't know that. Bruce Avery, good man. His goal in this new position was to help inspire, grow, and nurture young talent in news, sports, tech, media, management, social media, and PR. John has held many freelance positions over the years, including programming web streams for MTV Digital, teaching an MBA program at Metropolitan College, recording books for the blind, which I think we all did at one point here at WCWP, and serving as Long Island Bureau Chief for Metro Network Shadow Traffic. Okay. John is a great storyteller. Mostly, if not completely, true experiences he's had in New York radio. But I asked him about his experiences at WCWP, because those are the best. John and I have met for more lunches than we can count over the years, comparing and contrasting WCWP and WRHU. There are some differences, but for the most part, working with young people, giving them opportunities is his goal, and it is the goal of what we do. I have stolen ideas from John, and I hold him in the highest regard as a broadcaster, but more importantly, John, as an educator. I am proud to induct John Mullen into the WCWP Hall of Fame.
Well, it's great to see everybody, and thank you for this incredible honor. WCWP is an exceptional student-centered learning environment. It always has been under people like Bill Mozer, who taught me more about management than anybody in my career. Things that I learned from Bill years ago, I absolutely used when I got my first couple of jobs, and even to this day. Bill used to have us write these weekly reports. And my first job at WNEW, the program director had to write weekly reports for Westwood One, and he hated doing it. And I said, I know how to do that. Bill used to make me do that. And I became the guy who wrote the weekly reports to Westwood One upper management at like 22 years old. And that's just one of many, many examples. But WCWP is an incredible student-centered learning environment. It is a place where a student from any major can come in and be welcome. I remember the first day I transferred from Ithaca College, which was snowy. And I went up there and I said, I don't want to intern in Cortland. I want to intern in New York City. And we had this general manager who worked at WABC with Dan Ingram and Legends. And they had this incredible facility, which you still have today. And I remember when I came for the tour, the door opened and the smiling face of Tony Treguardo was the first person I ever met who was probably the best ambassador, because WCWP is an incredible recruitment tool. WCWP gives you pre-professional broadcast training, but it also embodies the best things of sororities and fraternities. It is a frat house with high-tech equipment where lifelong friendships are made, where marriages happen, where families are born, where as you graduate and you go on, the people that you were friends with at WCWP, the sorority fraternity, help you throughout your entire life. Frank Iametti, Dan Cox, Mike Navarro, I could go on and on about WCWP alumni who through the last 30 or 40 years have helped me. Whenever I had a question, I would call Dan or I would call Frank Iametti or anybody else, and they would help me because we had the common background of WCWP, where people like Bill Mozer and Dan Cox and now Pete Bellotti form a family of people helping people. And again, the diversity, equity, and inclusion at WCWP has always been there going back to the 60s. We would welcome anyone because we had to stay on the air flipping these tapes over and over again, as Dan was talking about. But I'll tell you, WCWP was way ahead of its time. In the 1980s, WCWP was running shows about why Shoreham shouldn't be a nuclear power plant, and it was doing really good community journalism at a time when community journalism wasn't as valued as today. WCWP's community format was about 30 years too soon, in my opinion. And it's been a place of innovation and a place of creativity and family building. And it allowed me to have a wonderful career, start a family, buy a house, and it inspired me to leave commercial radio and go into education, where I've been blessed to work with about 300 students a semester from all walks of life, because again, student media is a place where a psychology major can come to WCWP, do a show about psychology, interview people who potentially can hire them, win some awards, and grow their career, and they're different and better than the other people who are psychology majors applying for psychology jobs, because how many psychologists have a radio show that wins awards on a wonderful frequency in New York City? So I'm very honored. I feel privileged, and I just am so blessed that I transferred from Ithaca to WCWP, and I'm just so thankful Tony Treguardo was such a wonderful person to give me a tour of it, and so thankful for Bill and Dan and Roger and everybody. So thank you very much.
Still didn't tell him that story about Elijah Muhammad. All righty now. Our next inductee will be inducted by Rich Kahn, and that is Jon Cole will be our next inductee.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to be back here in the Post Bookstore. In 1976, a wide-eyed blonde kid from North Dighton, Massachusetts, arrived here at the Brookville campus, full of passion and enthusiasm, determined to be a sportscaster, and ready to take full advantage of his 4 years here. One of his very first stops was WCWP. His first job in his first semester was flagging tapes for Neil Mark's post-game football show. He followed that up in his second semester, becoming a sports anchor. And after that, he started going to Pioneer basketball games in Connolly Gym with his tape recorder. This led to play-by-play work, and that's how it all began. Fast forward to 1980, time to chase a career. Jon did what very few people have the nerve to do. He hopped on a bus with his tapes and resumes in hand, determined to find a job doing what he loved. He traveled to Rhode Island, Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Utah, then back to North Dakota to accept an on-air position at KUMV-TV, the NBC affiliate in Williston, North Dakota. He had found his new home. The hardworking people of the upper Midwest embraced him right away, and he returned their love by immersing himself in the fabric of his adopted community. He became synonymous with his new North Dakota home. He has since gone on to win 5 North Dakota AP Sportscaster of the Year awards, and in 2015 was voted into the North Dakota Sportscasters and Sports Writers Hall of Fame. His most coveted honor came a year later in 2016 when the new Williston High School gym was named after him, the Jon Cole Gymnasium. The old one, incidentally, was named after former Knicks star Phil Jackson. Not bad company at all. Simply put, Jon is a beloved legend in the Peace Garden State. But none of that would have been possible without all the wonderful people here at WCWP who have nurtured and supported him all these years, many of whom he still stays in contact with. I know Jon catches up with fellow inductee Dan Reagan every MLB All-Star break without fail, and he has stayed in touch with many others. Joining Jon today is his twin brother, Jeff, who is a longtime award-winning investigative reporter for the Fox affiliate in both of our adopted home of Philadelphia. So it's now my great honor and pleasure to present Jon Cole for induction into the WCWP Hall of Fame. Congratulations, my friend.
Richie Kahn. Richie Kahn took the time to help an 18-year-old guy who wanted to become a sportscaster. He took the time to always catch my sportscast on WCWP. He took the time to drive me into New York City, a place called the Bronx, where the Yankees play, and I was on the field doing interviews of the New York Yankees. And we drove back to the Bronx afterwards, and we went over the tapes, and he said, boy, those would be some of the best interviews that place has ever had. He took the time to take me to the 1979 National Football League draft where John Mullen was drafted. He took the time to take me to New York football writers' luncheons. He was just there for me every step of the way. And for about 16 hours, I was hired. I have this thing about North Dakota. I was hired by the CBS affiliate in Bismarck, North Dakota. And the next day, I got a phone call from the general manager telling me they were not going to hire me. I hadn't signed a contract yet. I hadn't even got out there. My mom was doing my laundry. I was booking tickets on now-defunct Northwest Airlines. And he called me up and said, we're not going to hire you. And I was crushed. Welcome to the big leagues, Jon Cole. Everything had run smoothly at WCWP and people who loved me. Now, I told Rich about this, and I didn't say, hey, could you call up the GM? But he did anyway. And he said, hey, what's going on? He contacted a lawyer. But anyway, he's always had my back. I lost my mom in January of 2022, lost my dad in 2000, but I still have Rich Kahn in my life. And I'm so, so happy for that. Thank you so much, buddy. WCWP and CW Post will always be a very, very special place. 1976, I walked in for the first time, CW Post preview day. I met Neil Marks. He said, I'm a sportscaster here. We're always looking for people. You can help me out. I saw the facility. I saw how friendly they were. I jumped into our vehicle with my mom, and I said, Mom, this is exactly where I want to go. I can come here, get on the air right away. It's not a factory like a Syracuse or Northwestern. This is where I want to go. So that's why I enrolled at CW Post. And so many opportunities that I was given. I was ready to go after 4 years. As Neil said, you have to pay your dues. You have to do those tape shifts. You have to flag tapes. But boy, you get an opportunity. Bill would test you to make sure, 2 audition tapes to make. He was testing you to see how badly you wanted it. And it came to fruition. And what a wonderful operation it was. I got to do play-by-play. I had never flown before. Joe Townley and I flew out to Ashland, Ohio to do their games, the experiences, doing CW Post basketball. Dan Reagan, Sports Channel, Sports Chatter with Neil, and we did talk shows, reporting from the field, as I talked about, media events. I mean, I was just ready. We did everything you could possibly do. I did a news shift. I covered Republican headquarters, Perry Dorier, when he tried to upset Governor Kerry. Just wonderful opportunities, and I was always amazed that other students didn't get so involved. I lived at that place, and I was ready to go. And I knew obviously it took me a while to get in, and I had to jump on a bus and knock on doors, but I knew once I got in, I had the talent and the abilities because I had done so many things. I mean, 4 years at WCWP, you were ready. Whether it was interviewing or play-by-play, I've done parades now, and people always say to me, they say, hey, how come you're such a good ad-libber? Well, I came from radio. My first part-time job, they kept on promising me a job at WSAR in Fall River, Mass. And I had the Saturday to Friday shift. They kept on promising me a sports job. It never came off. But they told me, well, if you play music, then people won't call in. And I had lonely women from Newport, Rhode Island calling me up, and my dad would say, what the hell would you know about relationships? You're 22. But it taught me how to communicate, and it taught me how to ad-lib. And a lot of people who go into television, I mean, they haven't had the radio experience. First job on the air post WCWP, as I said before, WSAR. So I was interviewed by the program director, and he said, well, John, because this is the overnight shift, you're going to have to run the board. He said, is that a problem? I said, it's no problem. Bill Mozer. All those tape shifts. Bill, I think I still owe you some tape shifts. So I was ready to roll, thanks to you. WCWP was not your classic college radio station because we had a great commander and a great leader. And he made us toe the line. He was our father. We learned so much. Friendships. Danny Reagan and I have been friends since 1977. As was earlier mentioned by Richie, we talk at the All-Star break. I've watched his kids grow up through postcards and how they've done so proud when he would direct the Atlanta Braves games and all the games on the NFL that he's done in his career, because we went through this together. Freddie Gaudelli, same thing, took over for me doing CW Post football. Every time Chris Berman mentioned his name, every time Al Michaels mentioned his name, one of us. He worked hard. No one gave it to him. No one gave Dan success. I had to jump on a bus. But we were ready to go because we had confidence in what we were taught at WCWP and the careers of the people who have come through this place. Phenomenal. And it's only going to get better because, as I told Bernie on homecoming last year, and I was proud to be a part of, it's one big talented family. And that's why I couldn't wait. Neil nicely told me a year ago during our All-Star break conversation that I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. It meant the world to me because I spent so much time at this place. And I thank everyone that was a part of this. It's only going to get better. Another quick Bill Mozer story. Staff members would give him a tough time. What are all these memos? What are all these memos? And he'd say, hey, this is what it's about in the real world. Guess what? I go out into the real world. Oh, my God, I thought of Bill Mozer every time. Now, of course, it's emails. 5,000 freaking emails. And right ahead of things. Also, promotion. Bill Mozer would always say, a funny thing happens if you don't promote. Nothing. Absolutely right. So you mastered so many young people out there, Bill, and I appreciate the job that you've done and the friendships that we've had. And one of the things that always would drive me crazy, so many stories about Syracuse University and all the sportscasters who they've produced, and they have. But it's not the only school that produces good sportscasters. So I said, and my twin brother and I fish a lot in New Hampshire, I'd say, if I ever get interviewed, man, CW Post is going to be my second word, WCWP. So I was able to pull it off. When I was nice enough to, the folks put me into the Hall of Fame with people like Phil Jackson and Roger Maris in Jamestown, North Dakota. I told the local paper that I started to cry because it meant so much, the journey that I had been through, kid from the East Coast, I knocked on doors, and to win this, it was just phenomenal. So the local paper picked it up, the North Dakota Associated Press picked it up, and then next thing I know, it's in the Houston Chronicle, it's in the Washington Post, CW Post. So boom, 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 boom. And just recently, in January, a very large cable operation in South Dakota called Midco did a piece on me, kid who got hired off of a bus 40 years. And they open up and say, Jon Cole began his broadcasting career, CW Post, Long Island University. So I was able to pull that off and get CW Post out there. We're a great family of people. Travis, I'm so proud of you as a guy who has pursued NBA play-by-play jobs. To see a guy, a pioneer, get on, I'm so proud. My heart beats every time I see somebody from CW Post and have success, because we've all been here. You know, we worked under Bill, friendships of a lifetime, and always a very, very special, special place in my life. And this is a special day in my life. My twin brother, who works in Philadelphia, brought me here to see Richie Kahn and all my friends. And I appreciate the great job you guys have done at WCWP to keep it rolling. And I said this to Dan many, many times. Now that we're Division I, I'm getting used to the Sharks name, but I follow it very, very closely. And just to have that out there and have that opportunity now for these young kids, my goodness, you know, play-by-play of Division I opportunities and swimming and hockey, because that's what young kids need, to be able to show somebody, this is what I've done, this is my resume. They're not going to be great right away. No one's great right away. But if you do your homework and keep it done, things can go smoothly. As I talked about Neil Marks, the first guy I met. Neil, I appreciate all the help you gave me to track me down where I was, and thank God for Google and whatever happened to that freaking guy. So, I mean, boom, you're able to find me. Thank you. You didn't blow me off as a senior and a young kid. I did a big story on Jerry Remy. Unfortunately, he's passed. He was Red Sox second baseman, did very well as a broadcaster. And I interviewed him. I would call up hotel rooms. This is way before they had security. He gave me a great interview. And I opened it up by saying, well, across Memorial Field in Somerset. Well, we get done with the interview. I'm jacked. And I said, hey, that was great. And right, Neil? Neil said, yeah, it was great. But one thing, we got to cut out the Cross Memorial Field. No one's going to know where Cross Memorial Field is on Long Island. Boom. Very good point. Very good point. Thank you for bending over and trying to help me out. I thank you for all of the friendships. I will stay in contact with all my friends. Danny, of course, I'll be calling you the July 4th. So proud of all you guys and what you've accomplished. And I thank WCWP, and I try to spread my money around because it's a place. Richie Kahn taught me to always give back, and that's what I have tried to do. So for Danny and Neil and everyone who I worked with for a final time, you're listening to Post Pioneer Football.
Our next inductee, excuse me, between my spring allergies and the Canadian dust that's been falling on us for the last 4 or 5 days, my throat is pretty bad. So if my throat does go away, excuse me, or I sound like a 15-year-old boy, blame Canada.
Is that a South Park reference?
Our next inductee, Cosmo Leone, will be inducted by Larry Lamendola.
For those of you that don't know me, I was at Post 1978. I was a transfer student from Nassau Community College. I'd like to start with a few thank yous. The first thank you is to Pete Bellotti. I'm retired now. I do a lot of nonprofit work with the Levittown Community Action Coalition and the Wantaw Lions Club. And I was doing something for the Yes Community Counseling Center. If anybody was at Post at that time, you remember the PSA or CBB. Yes, it's free and confidential. Came full circle. So thank you so much, Pete. I'd also like to thank Mozer here and the many Mozerisms, and for what Mozer did for me. Mozer gave me a career, an 11-year career in broadcasting from WCTO, RKO Radio Network. I got to teach here at Post for a couple of semesters. The Harry Lowenthal course, if you know it, Broadcast 104. He also recommended me for the Dave Jason Award in 1980, and you ticket on a subway, you can whatever you can get for the David A. Jason Award. He was the greatest, Dave. Okay, my friend, Cosmo Leone. Cos and I, we met in the fall of 1976, the bicentennial year. We were wide-eyed. We wanted to be the next Dan Ingram. We wanted to be personality radio. Look out, world, here we come. Cosmo persevered. Cosmo and I learned a lot at WHPC, which was the radio station at Nassau Community College. We learned from a really good guy who was the program director, Jim Green. We were under his tutelage first, and we both learned a lot. And I want to mention another person right now who's not here, and you probably know him, know of him, 4 decades in New York radio. We know him as Paul. His name is Jim Douglas. Jim is not doing that well now, and I just ask for your thoughts and prayers for him. And he was fired abruptly from that, whatever that radio station 103.1 is. I don't want to give them any credit. I got here in '78, and I wanted to get Cosmo here. And I said, Cos, this is a great place. You're going to learn a lot here. And Cosmo kept putting me, no, I'm not finished at NASA. I'm wrapping up at NASA. I said, come on, Cos, you got to come. This is, it's a great formula. You know, you've got Mozer. It's a professional organization. Finally got him here. It was so wonderful having Cosmo at the radio station. He learned so much, but what I really want to talk about is relationships and WCWP. I want to talk about the fact that Cosmo met the love of his life here at WCWP, the lovely Debbie Hauer. If it wasn't for WCWP, Cos, aren't you glad I told you to come? So that's number one. Number two, he has 2 lovely daughters, Lindsay and Alyssa. Third, he's a great friend to a lot of people. Cosmo's been the glue of everybody from our era. You kept in touch with Cosmo, you kept in touch with everyone. So wrapping it up, I can say Hall of Fame husband, Hall of Fame dad, Hall of Fame friend. And now it is my honor to induct Cosmo Leone into the WCWP Hall of Fame.
There are some days where my wife will think about the Hall of Fame husband. But it's my day, and I'm going to celebrate. I want to thank Larry very much. Great friend for all these years. And true, probably the best move I ever made. Bill is coming here. Thank you for everything you did as far as my radio career. Just unbelievable. And all the people that I met. For my new friends here that get inducted today, I'm an only child, so everybody here means a lot. Dan, brother, Fred, Kim's like my only sister that I ever had. John, you're a Red Sox fan. But you're still my brother, always. I love you. I had a freaked out thing about a week ago. Dan had messaged, I think it was Kim and myself. Dan was saying, man, you time your speech out, you have to keep it at a certain time, and da-da-da. And then I'm thinking, like, man, what am I gonna write and say? And I just, like, on instinct, like I try to always do, is just go by my gut and think about things at WCWP. The first thing I wrote down, Mrs. G. even if you were doing a lousy tape shift and you walk through the door, sorry, Bill, that smile, that warmth made you want to be there. And that's just amazing. Another thing, I know the phone went off before. People were calling for program guides. You get to know your friends and your teammates while you're putting those labels on. I'm proud to say that June and Jacob Schwartz of Roslyn always got their program guide. Always. The word was fraternity before. One thing that I'll always remember is that we always gave each other support. We always had each other's back. And I was trying to think of one example to fulfill that. There's some people in this room that will remember Karen Hecht. She's a sweetheart, talented lady. Karen wanted to be on the air for a period of time, and Cande and Ellyn were mentoring her to be on the air, and she finally had the opportunity to do her first newscast. I had the honor of engineering that newscast. Karen, as sweet as she is, wasn't that confident then. She kept saying to me, she goes, I'm so nervous. It was almost to a point where she's getting flop sweat. I said, you're gonna do great, take a breath. She goes through the 5-minute newscast and nails it flawlessly. And then, here's support. The door to the control room just wasn't open. It was thrown open. And everybody in that building came in and congratulated her. I thought that was like the coolest thing. Dan, if I remember, you were in, I think, Kim, Cande, Ellyn, and a couple of others, but I just thought that was like the greatest example of supporting each other. And of course, I have to remember my wife, my partner for 43 years now. I understand there's been more than one marriage from WCWP, so congratulations to those people. I have some fabulous news. I have a bidding war for Lifetime against Hallmark Channel on the rights to these relationships. I'll have my people call your people, if I ever get any people, but that's another story. So, Larry had mentioned this great place to work. The versatility and the variety of different things that you can do and learn here is just amazing. I had the opportunity to do Music Weekend, Top 40 morning show here, Hot AC show, play-by-play football and basketball, and a sports talk show, which was one of my favorite things, which was Sports Chatter. And thanks for Dan for that opportunity in doing that. So you kind of see what a professional setting does. I was on the air in a small town in Burlington, Iowa, KGRS and KBUR. I did a morning show there. See the similarity. Did play-by-play basketball, which was just the coolest thing. You get to do the games for my daughter when she played. And the variety of skills here at WCWP gave me that opportunity to have a successful career. So once again, Bill, thank you very much for that opportunity. I really appreciate it. I also wanted to thank just the people in this room that I worked with for always trying to push the envelope for all of us to get better. And when you say, John, we got on the bus, we went out and did that, you kind of learn a little bit, not only about life and yourself and what you can do. I want to thank the community of Burlington and West Burlington, Iowa. They're like my second hometowns. Just the greatest people. They taught me so much about life. Also, what a tenderloin really is, which is this much of pork and that much of a hamburger bun, with just maybe a little ketchup on it. We went through so much together, floods, tornadoes, challenging times, but the sign of a community is when you have those tough times, you band together and you get through it. So that was really important to me. I wanted to thank my parents, especially my dad, because this honor would have meant so much to him. My dad lived in New York all his life, and after my daughters were born, decided to move out, wanted to be by his grandchildren. And at first, there was major culture shock. I mean, you're coming from 8 million people to maybe 140,000 in an area. in 3 different states that I broadcast to. My dad used to say, "Hey, I met so-and-so. He listens to you, da-da-da, da-da-da." I said, "Not everybody likes me, so I can't be there to defend you on some things that I say," but he was like my unofficial second PR agent. I want to thank my daughters, Lindsay and Elisa, for the most important thing. Thanks for your patience. I know my schedule was goofy, getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and I know it kind of bothered you when you were young because you wanted to get home, but every time I went to a restaurant or if I went to a movie theater, I had to talk to somebody. Not only was that part of a job, but it was my responsibility, because I found out that the people that you talk to, that might be the only people they talk to all day. And that's why I still talk to people on all my long bike rides. I said, "Hi, how are you?" We did that yesterday, and you rolled your eyes still a little bit. Why is my dad doing this? But that's just the way I am, and I wanted to thank you for that. Now, on the other hand, when I was giving them VIP and backstage passes, "Excuse me, miss, in the produce aisle, put the kumquat down. I'm going to meet Justin Timberlake tomorrow. Come on over." As I said, the day I finally signed off on any measure of success in my life comes to my wife. "Debbie, you're the best. If there's a Hall of Fame for wives, you roller skate in." Not only she had to put up with a crazy schedule for a guy that does mornings and did it for a very long period of time, she supported all of my hobbies. I did Taekwondo for 22 years. And then I went into doing Ironman triathlons. And for anybody that does those type of events and you get to see your wife for 4 hours, but 4 times within 13 or 14 hours, she always has a smile on her face. I'm indebted to you, and I love you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is an honor.
The older I get, the easier I cry. I love the stories, all of them. I had to pause here for a second to get my breath, but I think the theme is very, very clear at all of these Hall of Fame things. We're a family. Whether we see each other every day, talk to each other. I haven't seen Bill since probably before the pandemic, and it was like nothing had changed. It's the wonder of WCWP. It's just such an oddball place. I call it the magnet for misfits, and I'm proud to be a misfit. Because as said earlier by John, everybody was welcome there no matter what. Under Bill, under me. And unfortunately, during the 90s, that didn't happen. And that's a decade we have to do a little more research on and find out what happened with the 4 or 5 directors they had over that 10-year period between Bill and I. But we will. We'll figure it out. And we'll find the best of the 90s, because the 80s are killing it today. Holy moly. Here's another one. But this one is cool because 3 people are going to induct her. So Kim Dillon is going to be inducted by Cande Roth, Ellyn Solis, and, well, Lew Scharfberg.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. It's good to see your faces after so many years, and especially because we're here to honor some of our friends. And Cosmo, you got me. It is a true honor today to be able to lend my voice in ushering Kim Dillon into this particular Hall of Fame. I'd like to begin by saying that this speech is about some of the most important character traits a person can be gifted with: kindness, grace, resilience, determination, perseverance, and tenacity. For this girl from Monticello, New York, arriving at CW Post in September of 1977 in my Levi's and Fry boots, it was like landing on another planet with Farrah Fawcett hairdos, Jordache jeans, and decked out Camaros for as far as the eye could see. Thank goodness I had my sister from another Mr. Candy with me. We began that semester with absolutely nothing to do as a teacher's strike set in, and the only person I had met was our ornery and strange advisor, Dave Jason. I know he was a ragtime legend, but he was completely useless as an advisor. Rest in peace. Then one boring and long day of no school and sitting around in Brookville Hall, Candy announced that she had built up the courage to go to the renowned WCWP radio station, which was the reason I chose the school to begin with. I followed the next day, and the only way I could describe the feeling was a little voice that said, "We have surely found our people," the folks that would shape our college years and in some cases our lives. And that includes meeting our Kim, who was this total Long Island bred girl. A big smile, kind of shy, very smart, and completely and utterly determined to succeed. She was and is steady as a rock, constantly observing and instinctively understanding how to manage the people she encounters. She was obsessed with the news, even then. She's the one that did that Shoreham news thing, by the way. She produced that. She had an expressive laugh, and I first learned of her deep dedication when we were told in no uncertain terms, probably by Mozer, that the way we were pronouncing our W's was wrong, and we better change it if we wanted to see any airtime at the station. And so it went that we would practice the damned W's. WC, WP, WC, WP, on and on. She practiced that shit like her life depended on it. She was going to say those letters better than any human who had ever entered that radio station since its inception. I marveled then, and still do, at that kind of determination. And WCWP was the lifeline to put that to the test. Kim pursued news stories all the time. 3 Mile Island had just happened, the nuclear power stuff, the corruption at the then Lilco. News, news, news. She diligently put one foot in front of the other, humbly following her path with her no-drama mama approach, and worlds began to open up for her. Her road took her from WCWP to my hometown of Monticello, New York, at WSUL, onward to Poughkeepsie, where she met and married her beloved Craig, and then to Cincinnati, starting in radio, and when the station folded, as Kim told me, I walked down the hallway and said, "Teach me TV." Moxie. She then made her bones as a TV reporter and producer, gaining real traction at the CBS affiliate while also welcoming her daughter, Caitlin. It has to be said at this juncture that Kim is one of those rare people that stays positive against all odds, stays the course, learns her lessons well, and does all of it with a sense of humor, a strong backbone, and an understated elegance that ties it all together. My dad used to say that Kim utilized all of her abilities to the max. It's no surprise then that her time in Cincinnati ultimately caught the attention of some bigwigs here at ABC in New York. What complete and thrilling validation for you, dear Kim, to be offered a position in the best and most competitive news market in the world. All of Kim's tenacity would be bringing her talented self back to New York City. Today at WABC, her colleagues and now friends, folks like on-air reporter and host, and my next husband, Bill Ritter, whatever, have the privilege of working with this gutsy, talented, and no bullshit producer who makes them look great every day. I spoke to Bill Ritter yesterday, and he wanted me to relay the following. Kim is one of the most important executives at the biggest TV station in the country, and I can say after being there for many years, more years than Kim, that I don't know what we would do without Kim Dillon. I can't fathom for a nanosecond her not being there. When any kind of poop hits the fan, which happens often, Kim is the one that gets the call to solve whatever needs to be done. She's not the only one that can get things done, but she is the only one that will try to find a solution any time of the day and any day of the week. It must have been the tape shifts. She is so committed to us as a family of sorts, as people who, alas, spend a lot more time with our work colleagues than we do with our actual families. There is nothing that she won't do to get the job done, even if it's giving up her personal time, even if she's asleep. She finds the time and saves the day. All of this is on top of instinctively knowing what a good news story is and a fair news story and how we should best tell it. One more thought, and I say this with all respect, the most respect and totally cognizant of the themes of the day. And I say it with heart and love. Kim Dillon is the mother of our newsroom. She knows the way to solve a problem, whether it be because of something that may be affecting one of us personally or for any business issue that may be occurring. She is the most trusted person with all of our information, and I mean all of it. Here's one example, and he had plenty. My daughter, when she was about 10, was frustrated that I always worked on Christmas, and unbeknownst to me, she wrote an email to Kim. In part, it said, "I know my dad's really valuable, but I'd love to see him for one Christmas sometime if it's possible." Sure enough, I get a call from Kim, and she says, "Bill, you aren't working this Christmas." I had no idea how that gift came to be. She is the it gal. I simply love her. We simply agree. In fact, nothing has really changed about Kim's work ethic or ability to hustle since the days at WCWP, except that the WABC Eyewitness News family gets to benefit from her decades of experience born of grit, not only in news, but in life. I can only hope that the youngsters that I'm sure she helps mentor realize who sits amongst them. On a personal note, I have the precious honor of calling Kim my lifelong friend, a ride or die, who, if I needed her at a moment's notice, she would be there. Same. And with that, it is my great pleasure to welcome my dear friend, Kim Dillon, respected master news expert, excellent friend, wife, mother, and sister to the WCWP Hall of Fame. Nobody does it better. And since Kim is so incredibly unique, it's going to take three of us to induct her. So I'd like to now bring up our friend Lew Scharfberg, who really needs no introduction.
No telephone? No telephone? I'm old school. I can't do with the phone and all that. Thank you, El. I apologize if I'm going to repeat stuff that's been already said, but I think it needs to be amplified. First of all, congratulations to all of this year's inductees into WCWP Hall of Fame. Full disclosure, I'm on the Hall of Fame committee, which was chaired by Dan Cox. And Dan, he was at the helm of the committee and he saw that we made so many changes to the committee this year, and it made it possible for this impressive 2022 class to be inducted. It was terrific. In WCWP tradition, there have been those that are being inducted today that have found success in major markets or working for large media companies or ensuring that fans can watch their favorite major league teams. But just as importantly, there are those being recognized today that have spent decades in small and rural markets where entertainment and information sources are much more limited. Those folks have become beacons for their community. It was mentioned floods and tornadoes. We don't think of those things in the New York area. They happen. And they look to the communication leaders in the community. Or possibly your kid's basketball team makes state finals, and you can't afford to take time off from work to see them live. It's very important. Like I said, we don't think about that stuff here in the New York area, but it's very, very important. Now to Kim. I know, you're getting nervous, Sam.
We all are.
With good reason. Yeah.
Settle in, folks.
That guy has a red button for the delay, right? I want to talk about a quality that Kim has that intrigues me, probably because
I don't possess this quality. It's certainly one of the things that qualify her to be a member of the WCWP Hall of Fame. Some may call it her ability to deal with change, but I see it as more. Kim not only deals with change, she manages change and she leads through change. On the surface, it's evident looking at her career path, you heard it. She started in upstate New York, did some part-time work at WCBS News Radio 88, moved to Cincinnati, made the transition from radio to television, then coming back to New York to work at the #1 news station in America, WABC. At Eyewitness News, she went from assignment manager to producer to executive producer of special projects and eventually to assistant news director. Kim's been at WABC for about 17 years now. A lot of her time has been spent planning and managing special projects. That means she produced election night coverage, debates, the New York City Marathon, the auto show special, etc. However, over the past decade or so, many watchers have changed their viewing habits or adopted new technologies to consume news and other programming. That's where Kim's leadership through change comes in. Among her responsibilities at WABC is to make her station a forerunner in cutting-edge methods to present the news. Part of that mission is not only to grow the audience, but in today's media culture, maintain the audience. That means packaging the news in a way that individual consumers want it delivered to them. In addition to the day-to-day responsibilities of running a news department, Kim's portfolio includes the station website, their apps on streaming platforms and mobile devices, podcasts, social media, just to name a few. With these new forms of delivery, Kim is able to produce long-form content such as documentaries or, the newest thing, data journalism. By the way, if you're a news junkie and you're a John Lennon fan, you have to check out the documentary she did, Eyewitness to the Death of John Lennon. It will bring back memories. Check it out on all their, all their platforms. I didn't get paid for that, by the way. So I asked Kim, I said, how do you lead through all this change? She said the keys are having an environment that's open to what's next and finding the early adapters amongst your employees and using them to help you lead. She summed it up by saying, innovating is survival. Be the innovator. Welcome to the WCWP Hall of Fame, Kim. And now to put it into this trilogy, Kim. Oh, by the way, you didn't have to be nervous. You see?
That was a lot less harmless than I thought it was going to be. Thank you, Lew. Thought I'd have to take him out of here with a hook. Kimmy. This is so emotional for me, and I'll supply the personal and emotional part of this introduction. I'm, first of all, so honored that you asked me to do this for you, Kim, because you mean everything to me. We don't see each other a lot, but we're family. The story goes that we met, of course, at WCWP, which was one of the best places of my life, where I got hit by the radio bug and met lifelong friends like Kim. But there's a thing that we say that you know people for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I didn't know it then, but Kim and I were going to have a lifetime together. So let's go back to 1978 on this very campus. We met, we became friends, and we worked at WCWP, and we spent a lot of time there, most of our time there, summers, everything. We did the tape, we did everything we had to do, the memos, the PSAs, we did it all, loved every minute, and have no regrets. It taught us everything. I'm sure you've all heard that the people you meet can be there for a lifetime. Kim was definitely here for my lifetime because, as fate would have it and the universe said, she got her first job in my hometown at WSUL. She lived with my mother and father and my brother and my family. I lost my family young. My mom, my father died. He was 21. I was 21. My mother, 30. I was 30. And my brother when I was 50. And Kim has been there all throughout that because she is my family. I'm going to cry. I don't want to cry. But when I look at Kim, I see all the people we've lost. And I'm so grateful to have her. So here we are at WCWP. We're graduating. We don't have real jobs. She's a manager at Arthur Treacher's. She would come home smelling like fish every day. But she was determined then and determined now. She's one of the hardest workers I've ever come across. And when she did a job, whether it was frying fish or washing the floor of rich people's houses, she gladly did it. And she did it with me with love. We got our job working for rich people in Upper Brookville at their mansion. And we were supposed to cook dinner every night for them. And story told, we worked for 3 days, we got fired, got rehired to drive their kids to school because they couldn't have the heart to throw us out. They were giving us room and board. I was ready to kill the wife, hated her. I don't have that kind of dignity that Kim has, and I really want to take a broom, and you know what I wanted to do with it. So she says to us, Ellyn, make sure you clean the refrigerator before you go out for the night. Well, Kim looked at me, she knew trouble was coming, and she said, you go back to the room, I'll meet you back there. She finished the job, because that's what Kim does. She always finishes the job. So now we're fired. We move into an apartment in Glen Cove, and we're friends forever. Then she moved in with my family. We adopted her. She was there for me for every step of the way. Then she had the audacity to go to Poughkeepsie. She met her beloved Craig. We love Poughkeepsie. They had the best loft apartment to this day I've ever seen. And I knew Kim and Craig would be together for a lifetime. And Craig, this is where I want to thank you for loving Kim the way I do. Then they move when I'm just newly married and pregnant and needed her so bad, and she decides, well, I'm going to Ohio. Anyway, we still stayed in touch. We still loved each other. And back she came to New York City, but now she's got, hoity-toity high-up job. She's management. People fear her. Fear Kim? This cannot be. When I would tell people, because I'm in the business of, I do traffic on the radio. It's not that big a deal, and I've been all over the radio stations. When I tell people at WABC I know Kim Dillon, they're like, you know Kim Dillon? I said, yeah, we're family. She's my sister. People cannot believe it. They just cannot believe it. So she's given me even impressive power to move further. We got married, we had children, and life went on. But you're my forever friend. You're my family. I am so greatly honored to to induct you, my Kim Dillon, into the WCWP Radio Hall of Fame. But besides that, if there were a Hall of Fame for good people, good human beings, you're at the top of the list because you're one of the best human beings on this planet. I love you.
We have another photographer, so be ready first. You go first. Photo 1, 2, and 3. Ready, guys? Here we go. You got it.
Well, all right, that was emotional. And Pete, I respect run of shows, so I will be brief. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to see you. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am to be with you all today. I will be brief because I had the chutzpah of asking 3 lifelong friends to induct me into the Hall of Fame. Lew and Cande and Ellyn, you 3 have been so important to me my whole life through these many years. And you've all been equally successful in your own right, cable TV and radio and music public relations. All 3 of you are Hall of Fame worthy. So thank you for doing this today. I couldn't celebrate this day without you, so really, thank you. And to be inducted with these people, these wonderful people, impressive people, classmates, Cosmo and Dan and John and Suzanne, they make that very, very special for me today. All of us, for all of us, and for all of you, really, if you have an association with WCWP WCWP. You'd think I'd say it correctly today after all of that, Bill. So how it started has everything to do with how it's going today. Even for those of you whose lives veered away from radio and TV, I think we can all trace some of our skills that we learned at that tiny, wonderful place to the career path that we've chosen. I was asked by the Hall of Fame committee about what skills and concepts I learned at WCWP. I replied that it was hard to choose one, really. And as I thought about it, I realized we were innovative and adaptive before they were words that we heard from consultants years later, right? We discovered our purpose while we were still trying to find our way. We were collaborative before there were things such as collaboration rooms. We were so hungry. We knew we were eager to start our careers because we loved what we were doing. We worked hard, we played hard, and we edited with grease pencils until we dropped all night long. We critiqued one another on what we considered to be the perfect segue. We argued all night long in the studio about who was best, Talking Heads, Elvis Costello, The Clash, or Devo. We laughed out loud at the antics of post-serial. And then there was Mrs. G, Mrs. Gaffney, teaching us maybe the biggest skills and concepts of them all: kindness, humility, grace, patience, and above all, a sense of humor. Mrs. G. I think I've used all those skills to this day, mentoring students and young professionals as they came up. Bill Mozer, you created a meaningful lab experience that resulted in the perfect formula for my life today, so thank you for that. Thank you for the exposure to the greats in our industry, the professionalism, and yes, those tough talks and even the suspensions when we didn't get them quite right. Yeah. For me, my first job, WSUL in Monticello, as you've heard, paid me $150 a week. I thought I had the world by the tail. But I wouldn't have been able to support myself at 23 without Candy's mom and her mom and her grandmother. So I was 23, your mom was 63, and grandma was 83. It was quite a time. They took me in, further proof that we don't do this alone, ever. The station, in paying me $150 a week, there was not a bank or a business in town that would cash our payroll checks because the station was so insolvent. Things got a bit better in Poughkeepsie, where I made a little bit more, not a lot more, but enough to get by. And it's also where I met the love of my life, Greg Ruddle. He was wonderful, talented, seriously dedicated, and attractive. Photojournalist. Still is. And he's here supporting me today the way he's done every day for 42 years. Thank you. I love you. We married, planned our next move, and so with a net worth of, what, $600.87, something like that. Off we went, and our beautiful 2-year-old girl in the car seat behind us. We set out for Cincinnati, Ohio. Craig in newspapers, me in radio, and then later television. It wasn't always easy, but we learned so much. School board meetings, town councils, municipal budgets. There's not a day I would have traded for that. Not a day. Being part of those communities. 15 years later, we came back east when our daughter enrolled in college here in New York City. And I had an unimaginable career opportunity presenting itself at WABC. I was brought up on Eyewitness News. Was this some sort of a dream? I remember thinking at the time it was either the job of a lifetime or an incredible midlife crisis. Since then, I've covered the election of presidents and popes and a global pandemic. I've covered the heightened awareness of racial and political divisions in America, and I've had a role in dispatching correspondence to faraway countries to shine the light on suffering associated with wars and human migration and natural disasters. And I have never forgotten, not even on the worst days, how lucky I am and how there are hundreds of people who would love to be me. So I'm full of gratitude. I truly am. And there's a lesson in this for young people looking to get into the business. Be patient. Sacrifice to a fault. Be humble. Push through. Stay tough. Vote. Vote. Be a good citizen. Good journalism begins with being a good citizen. Because, my friends, journalism matters. It matters. It matters more now than ever in the face of all the noise and megaphones to the contrary. And at a time when newspapers and station groups are shrinking, books and poems are being banned, librarians and doctors are being threatened with arrest. For those no longer in the business, I say you have a role too. You should demand it. Don't settle. Be heard. The cost of responsible, fact-based journalism is high, no doubt. It is high. But the cost without fact-based journalism, that's immeasurable. Buy a newspaper. Get a subscription. Seek other sources. It's so important. So if someone asks you if they should go into journalism, please say yes. And point them to the magnificent words of the great Muhammad Ali. Impossible is not a fact. It's an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration. It's a dare. My friends, I dare you. Thanks for this incredible honor. Thanks and great congratulations to my fellow inductees and to the staff and administration of Long Island University. Thank you. Thank you both.
You're supposed to take this home with you.
I like Wanda.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if Kim's speech was going to make me misty, but it did. The last segment. Could not have said it better. As someone who's been a news junkie since the age of 10, whose parents yelled at him for sitting and watching the Watergate hearings at 12, and worked at NBC News as part of my career, and left for a lot of the reasons that you said we need news for. I couldn't echo those. I couldn't say it better. Thank you. And I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that we know what's going on. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you again. Okay, I've been handed a note on a napkin from the current chair of the Hall of Fame committee, who is picking the new Hall of Fame, and that's Suzanne Langwell. And she wants me to remind you that nominations are open, so if you know somebody you want to nominate for the Hall of Fame for the 2023 class, which is what they're working on, check your email. You might get an email about it, or the Alumni Facebook page. And after this is over, you can actually just ask Suzanne, what to do. So we're kind of at the halfway point here. We're at halftime. A lot of sports metaphors today. Too many sports guys. So the next award we're handing out is the Founders Award. It was established last year in the name of one of our original Hall of Famers, one of our founders, Art Beltrone. And it's the Art Beltrone Award, and I'm going to call Pete Bellotti up to present it and introduce the inductees.
So I spoke about DeAnna at our station dinner, which we continue the tradition of every year around April, where we honor our students and our senior directors who have helped build our station throughout the course of this year. And I'm going to say, the last year was a lot of learning for me, and there was a lot of adjustment for a station and for students that were already here working with Dan. But this individual made this transition flawless. And I have so much gratitude to DeAnna for what she's done for me and what she did for this station, as she has now graduated and is going out into the world of looking for a job. Your contributions to our station there's no words to describe. Right now, I'd like to call up our senior directors, Michael Moffa and Vincent Randazzo, who will present the Art Beltrone Award to DeAnna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Moffa, and I don't think ever in my entire life I've met anybody that more fully embodies the term noble. When I first wandered into the radio station, it was a very tumultuous point in time for the student side of things because we weren't actually recognized as an organization on campus, which means we got no funding and frankly no help from administration, which made us conducting ourselves very difficult and expensive. And I think it was just DeAnna's pure and unyielding will that was able to get us through that period in time, because I'm sure anybody else faced with that would have just thrown their hands up and walked away, because I know I would have. But she was just unwilling to quit. And it got us through that period of time. And the way she conducts herself and treats people makes her a pleasure to be in the company of, a pleasure to work with, and quite frankly, a role model that is second to none. And before we present her with this award, I'm going to hand it over to the Vice President of the WAVE and Student Program Director of WCWP, Vincent Randazzo.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be presenting this award not only to an excellent leader, but a very good friend of mine. I'm going to try my best to sum up what made DeAnna's time at the WAVE so impactful for us. DeAnna is an idealist, a dreamer, and continuously kind. I remember when I first joined the station, I was struck by how friendly she was. I was so confused as to why this senior was being so nice to me. You know, why they were inviting me to things in an already established friend group. But that's just how DeAnna is. And this kindness was extended to all members, not just to me, but to everybody. And this kindness helped me come out of my shell and become, you know, what I am now, guiding the station. But DeAnna's openness and passion for the station shone through during recruitment periods, cheerfully recruiting new members, and many of who have cited DeAnna as the reason why they came up to the table, because she was so, you know, friendly and inviting to them. And even members who have joined after DeAnna have only heard us speak of her with glowing comments. You know, we've only said good things about you since you've gone, DeAnna, because you were so important to us. DeAnna was also the creative force behind the WAVE's identity, creating the WAVE's new logo and branding, making the T-shirts for us that we wear proudly every time we table and are at events. It's essentially our uniform. And DeAnna was always pushing the WAVE, coming up with grand events and planning parties for us. She was the heart of the station, and we all have great memories of her goofing around at our second home. The WAVE wouldn't be half of what it is now without DeAnna. And it's a good thing that the student station manager position died with her, as me and Moffa wouldn't have been able to fill out what DeAnna had left for us, but I'm damn glad sure to have followed in her footsteps and guidance, and I couldn't have asked for a better mentor and friend. Thank you, DeAnna.
Hold on 1 second. Gotta pull up the notes app. Hi, everyone. So I am so honored to be receiving this award. It really is a bittersweet ending to the remainder of my undergrad years. And it's kind of funny to look back, you know, to think about how I got to this point, because unlike a lot of the individuals here, I had no interest in broadcasting or even being on radio, and like the percentage of students on this campus, I didn't even know we had a radio station. But, you know, my sophomore year, I can thank Dan Casaza and Jordan Georgiano, along with few other people who brought me to the station to escape, you know, the frat boys that loomed Hillwood and the end zone. My first few weeks, you know, I'd be sneaking into the lounge every day and passing Dan's office, and I'm like, man, this man's really gonna kick me out because I'm just here taking up space eating my sandwich. But as time lingered, you know, new friendships bloomed, nightly adventures awoke, and I really involved myself in so many events that, you know, would become yearly, you know, movie nights and flower sales, and the station became more than just a station. It became a home. And I'm during that time, I was kind of going through a weird in-between where I was trying to figure out where I belonged, you know, wanted to see if my major was something I truly wanted to pursue. And the station was really a foundation for me during that time. And so I had briefly joined a sorority my freshman year to, be involved and find people. And to this day, no matter how much they stress that, those friendships will last a lifetime, the station, has so many individuals and people that, really settle that foundation for those lifelong friendships and memories and laughs and tears. And so I was really lucky to be a part of such an incredible, organization. So life was good. Everything was great. We're out building friendships, and then just like that, it's gone. The pandemic hit, and it was definitely really something that was rough for me because I had just made so many great memories and friendships with these incredible people, and that was something I didn't want to lose, and it was something that I really wanted, other new students who were up and coming to have. I felt like that was so important just because this is a foundation for not only friendships, but for careers, for memories, for just building yourself as an individual. And so, we went from 20 students to merely 8, maybe even less, and we all had the same direction where we wanted, to build and continue the legacy that the WCWP and the Wave has. And so with, our, broke wallets as college students, we really poured so much time into events to just get the name out there, to make noise and, tell the school that there is a radio station, and it's more than just a station. It's, a beginning for a family and for friendships and memories. And so I'll never forget, in September 21, Jordan and I, we had just picked up 3 boxes of Domino's pizza because, students love free stuff. They love free food. And we're running late. We had almost gotten into a car accident. We're talking about, what are we going to talk about for this meeting? We're thinking, all right, the 5 students who are showing up, they're here for the pizza. And I'll never forget opening that door and seeing more than 25 students in that room. And we look at each other, we're like, oh my gosh, they're here for the station. They're here for us. And I knew then that everything was going to be okay and everything was going to be great. So although a majority of our students aren't officially broadcasting or journalism, I love that there's so much diversity in our students because it really cultivates just the creativity and individuality that makes up the station, Today we have over 30 plus students. We have over 18 shows on air. We have a full equipped lounge with 2 air fryers, a Wii and Xbox for countless nights of Guitar Hero. And again, those flourishing friendships, as we can see in this room, they last a lifetime, the tears and the laughter. So to conclude it all, as I always say, a station isn't a station without its people. And so I'm so honored to be receiving this award today, so thank you.
Yeah, DeAnna brings up some bad memories for me. In the 20-year term I spent as director, the worst time I spent was during the pandemic because I was there for almost 18 months all by myself every day. I was the only one allowed back on campus because the transmitter had to be maintained and we had to stay on the air. But you, as I said at the station dinner, you're the epitome of kindness. You're the epitome of what exactly that station needed at that moment in time when everyone had drifted away. And just so this wasn't mentioned, and this was before I left, this was right before I retired, the station won an award from student activities as basically the only group that came back in numbers after the pandemic. And I take a lot of pride in that, and you should too, sweetheart. All right, second half, here we go, get pumped. More 80s, and then we go to the aughts, which is my favorite. All right, so this next person, well, these next 2 people, I have the highest regard and respect for their careers and and just what they mean to the radio station and have meant to the radio station over the years. I'd like to call up Fred Gaudelli, who will induct Dan Reagan.
Before I start, Dan wanted me to remind everybody, if you want a copy, your own personal copy of the trilogy, see Dan after the show. Dan Reagan and I first met on campus in the fall of 1979. However, our worlds intertwined much sooner, in the beginning of that decade, at Sacred Heart Elementary School in Hartsdale, New York, where my aunt and Dan's mom were teachers. My aunt was Dan's 5th grade teacher? 6th grade teacher. Fast forward to the winter of 1978, where I am visiting the only college I applied to, Emerson in Boston. Emerson had an excellent communications program, which matched up perfectly for me and my quest to become the next Marv Albert. Unbeknownst to me, Emerson was a series of office and apartment buildings on Commonwealth Ave in downtown Boston, i.e., no campus. On the ride home, my dad looks at me and says, "Well, that's great, you're all done." To which I said, I don't want to go here. And after he reminded me it was the only school I applied to, he gave me a look and said, "You better figure out what's next." When I got home, my aunt, Dan's former teacher, asked me how it went, and when I told her it didn't, she said, "You know, I know another sports-obsessed kid just like you who also wants to be the next Marv Albert, and he goes to a school called CW Post. He's on the radio there, talking sports and loving it." So I applied, got accepted, and in early May, I took the 1-hour drive from Westchester County in what was like a summer day. Sunny, 80 degrees, kegs on the great lawn, people throwing frisbees and getting high.
Those are the good old days, Fred.
I registered for school that day. After doing nothing but attending classes my freshman year, I joined WCWP in the fall of 1979. And when I sought out and met the station's sport director, Dan Reagan, his first remark was, "Where have you been? I've been waiting for you." It wasn't long before he was showing me how to do a board shift, how to correctly enunciate WCWP so I could actually get on the air, fighting Claudia Greco for airtime on the evening news. And not long after, we were calling Pioneer football and basketball games together. Dan and I became great friends. He became a trusted mentor for me for the next 44 years, and we had a ball each trying to become the next Marv Albert. In Dan's senior year, he did an internship at the fledgling cable sports channel out here in Long Island called Sports Channel, where Dan was exposed to live TV production. And when his internship was up, they smartly hired him. And that's where his quest to become the next Marv Albert became the quest to direct live television sports, and did he ever. Dan began a 40-year career directing the Islanders, Nets, and Mets, then the Atlanta Braves during their historic run. He sprinkled in ESPN Major League Baseball, college football, and college basketball, the NHL and NBC, along with many events for the CBS College Sports Network. Dan won 5 Emmy Awards for his work and earned the reputation of being one of the top television directors in all of sports. And as fate would have it, we actually did a college football game together for ESPN in the early 90s, and it was as if nothing had changed. Now, if that were the end of Dan's story, that would be glorious. But it's not, because aside from sports, Dan's other passion is rock and roll music. And in the early 90s, he set out to write a book about what the biggest artists in the genre were thinking about when they wrote their hit songs. Billy Joel, Jimmy Pankow, Grand Funk Railroad, Don Henley, Glenn Frey, Gordon Lightfoot, Randy Bachman, Christy McVie, and that's about the half of it. The list goes on and on. He began the interview and writing process, which we all know can be laborious, and put it down. Then came the COVID shutdown, and he picked it back up. The result was 2 books, Classic Rock and Roll Songs Revealed, Volumes 1 and 2, the greatest artists of our lifetime, sharing what was in their minds and heart when they wrote their hit songs. What a magical ride. For all of us here who did a music weekend shift, whatever that show at midnight was called.
Midnight Progressive.
What was it? Midnight Progressive. Thank you very much, Teresa. This book. What's that? Okay. Anyway, it's a must read. Truly one of the best and most fun experiences I've had reading a book.
During my years working with John Madden, we would ride the bus from city to city and have all kinds of debates. And one of the debates we'd often have was, what is a Hall of Famer? How do you define a Hall of Famer? And best of your generation, most dominant, transformational figure, what have you. And Madden, as he always did, had the last word, and his definition, I think, is the best, and is, can you write the history of what you're talking about without mentioning this person? I can honestly say you cannot write the history of WCWP without writing and talking about Dan Reagan. And while this is long overdue, I am thrilled to introduce Dan and induct him into the WCWP Hall of Fame. Dan. Where's our trophy?
Oh. Well, he spelled your name wrong like I did every time I emailed you, Danny. So. Here, I got it. Ah. There we go. Take 3 photos. 1, 2, 3.
Wow. Thanks for that amazing introduction, Fred. If you're looking for something else to do now that you're no longer producing games, I'm looking for a publicist for my books. Just need a little work on getting the website in, classicrocksongsrevealed.com. And you're there. I'd love to have you. It'd be a thrill. This ceremony is a really big deal for me for many reasons. Not the least of which is how many people are blessed enough to be introduced by somebody who's in 3 Hall of Fames. Fred Gaudelli is in the Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He is in this one, of course. And in about 6 or 7 weeks, Fred Gaudelli will be receiving the Pete Rozelle Award for Broadcast Excellence and take his place in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I feel like asking the audio person now to cue up the theme to Mission Impossible, because trying to thank the people and add some other mentions in the time allotted will be a challenge. But as the saying goes, I'll give it the old college try. First, I want to congratulate my fellow inductees, John Mullen, Travis, Suzanne, Kim, Cosmo, and Jon Cole. And congratulations to DeAnna for your award. Being a member of the class of 22 with all of you is truly very humbling. My senior year in high school was rapidly drawing to a close. And kind of like Fred, I hadn't not even come close to thinking about where I wanted to go to college. All I knew was that I wanted to go someplace where I could become a sports broadcaster on the radio. Ithaca College had a sports broadcasting major, and that sounded good to me. But my mother said that was a little out of our price range. Fortunately, I had an English teacher in high school named Lance Rosa, who I'm still friends with today, who knew of my broadcasting aspirations. And he told me there were 2 schools on Long Island, right next door to each other, and he offered to drive me out to see them. We stopped at Tech, and I was unimpressed. We came to Post and immediately visited WCWP. Inside of 5 minutes, I looked at Lance and said, "This is where I want to go." The fact that the campus is so beautiful is just icing on the cake. So Mom enrolled me into CW Post, but during the first week, I enrolled myself into the Bill Mozer School of Broadcasting. Bill told all of us that we weren't here to play radio. Yes, we certainly had a lot of fun. But he made sure that we were aware that we had a community to serve, and we were to do it in a professional manner. Bill never accepted anyone's first demo tape. Some people had to go do as many as 3. But that gave Bill an idea of who was serious and dedicated and taught us that in the business world, we would have to earn what we got. He, as Jon Cole pointed out, Bill also drilled into us the importance of promotion. In fact, he did that by placing a sign on every wall in the building, and I do mean every wall. That sign said, one thing happens if you don't promote, nothing. There are so many things that I learned from Bill Mozer, but time won't allow me to go into all of it. But Bill, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see you again. And having you here is a real big deal. It's a big deal to be amongst so many people who are so close and are friends. Thank you, Brian Miles, my old bud, for coming. And Teresa, thank you for coming. In my junior year here, I had to actually go to class and not spend all the time at the radio station. Fred and I took a Foundations in Broadcasting class together. Our first assignment was to write an essay called What I Did on My Summer Vacation. We were also told to list what our favorite TV show was and give the reasons why. The professor was Christopher Dodrell. He read parts or most of our essays to the class. To my dying day, I will never forget some of the things that Fred wrote in his essay, but that's a story for another day. Dodrell read mine, and then he said, "The Honeymooners is your favorite show, huh?" I said, "That's right." He looked at me and he said, "You and I are going to get along just fine." Talk about hitting the jackpot. I was given carte blanche to call out any Honeymooners line that I felt like was appropriate at the moment in that class. Why couldn't that have happened back at Sacred Heart? There were so many nuns that I wish I could have told, "You're going to the moon." It would have made school so much more fun. Well, senior year, Chris Dodrell taught a television production class off campus, right across from the Nassau Coliseum. In my mind, I was still thinking very much I wanted to be in radio, but yet here I was signing up to take another TV class. I kept telling myself it was because it would be a fun class and an easy 3 credits, and I could have fun with Chris Dodrell again. Sometime in mid to late February, the phone in my dorm room in Riggs Hall rang. It was Keitha Fairhurst. She and I were in several classes together, and we were friends. She told me that for her senior project, she was going to produce a 1-hour variety show using my TV production class. She then said, "And you're going to direct it. So when would you like to get together and go over the format?" I said, "No, I'm not, Keitha. I'm sorry, but I'm not directing your project." She then said, "You don't understand, Danny. Dodrell told me the only way he would let me use your class was if you directed it." Stunned, I told her I would call her back, but first, Professor Dodrell and I needed to have a little chat. So I called him up, and after identifying myself, I said, "What are you doing to me?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You know what I mean. Keitha Fairhurst just told me that you said she could use our class for her senior project, but she said you told her she had to use me to direct it. What's up with that?" He then said, "Look, I see something in you. You're going to do this, and you're going to be just fine." I guess I did all right, but I was still thinking I wanted to announce on the radio, just like Cosmo. As so often is the case, we humans make plans and God laughs. I had been doing an internship, like Fred said, with Sports Channel, and they hired me right out of post. I then spent the next 4+ years sitting behind Bill Webb, watching him direct hundreds of Mets, Islanders, and Nets games. And he made it look really easy. One day he took off his headset and he said, "Danny, come here." He gave me the headset and he sat me down. And I found out that it wasn't as easy as Bill made it look. In those years, those first few years, I also spent a lot of time in the Bronx working on Yankees games. That included a 3-year stretch tied to the hip of Mickey Mantle, which was fun and pretty interesting. Speaking of the Yankees, 39 years ago yesterday, June 2nd, 1984, I worked a Yankees game in Toronto. It was your typical pre-pitch clock American League game that moved at a snail's pace. And it went extra innings. As a result, Mel Allen and I were going to miss our Air Canada flight back to New York. So I did what any red-blooded, normal American male would do. I hijacked a cab that came that was supposed to be for Don Baylor of the Yankees. And I told the cab driver, you need to get us to the airport and you need to get us there fast. American Airlines had the last flight out, and it was on that flight that one particular flight attendant decided she would give this lucky guy her phone number. And it was a 56-minute flight. In 1987, I married that incredible woman who I love to death. Ralph Cramden used to tell Alice that she was the greatest, but that was on TV, and that wasn't real. Gina, you are the greatest. You're a Hall of Fame wife, a Hall of Fame mom, Hall of Fame person. The fact that you're here with me, and we've been married almost 36 years, makes this day extra special. When we got back from our honeymoon in the fall of '87, I began directing the Islanders, and the next season I was directing the Mets. Back in the late '80s, pitch speeds weren't as big a deal as they are today. They weren't interfaced into the graphics program. So we periodically would have an intern hold a radar gun behind home plate and tell us what the pitch speeds were. So one day, I called Christopher Dodrell and I asked if he wanted that job for a couple of homestands. He came and did it. The fact that this mentee got to work a few games with his mentor meant a great deal to me. He and I still trade honeymooners lines almost daily via email. I wish he could have been here today. In my remaining moments, there's a few things that I'd like to address to the LIU administration and to the young people here. In my years at Turner and later at ESPN, CBS, and NBC, it was a very common occurrence to work with some play-by-play guy who graduated from Syracuse. The list includes Marv Albert, who didn't graduate from Syracuse, but they claim him. Dick Stockton, Sean McDonough, and Fred's good friend Mike Tirico, to name just a few. There are plenty more. However, as impressive as that list of Syracuse grads is, I would submit to you that the list of people who came from WCWP, or as I call it, the little station that could, is every bit as impressive, if not more so. You guys right there, I want you to look at that man right there, Fred Gaudelli. He's going to Canton. It's not because he's a great football producer. He's being honored because he's the best to ever do it. In today's lexicon, he's the GOAT. That might sound like an opinion, but it's a fact. And everybody in our industry acknowledges that. Speaking of the best to ever do something, almost all of us here, like Fred and me, aspired to be on the radio. And some of us still do it in one form or another. Yet, the greatest to ever work behind a microphone was Rush Limbaugh. We can disagree about his politics and his view of the world, but there's no denying that he dominated radio like nobody ever has or ever will. And Rush knew a great engineer when he saw one. For 29 of his 32 years, ditto heads like me got to hear El Rushbo say, "Hey, Mike, let me know when you have cut 10 and cut 14. Oh, you have it already? He was also responsible for the bumper music, which was always very clever, timely, and genius in its subtlety. That Mike is Mike Maimone. I had invited him to come. There he is. I didn't see you there. I'm so glad you made it.
Thank you.
Mike also, Mike needs to be standing where I am next year. You gave me so many laughs, you don't even know. There are plenty of people who do voiceovers for a living. But if there's someone who does voiceovers that's more in demand than Jim Cutler, we all knew him as Jim Mulvey, then I want to meet him or her. He also came out of WCWP. I went to his website recently and I scrolled, and I scrolled, and I scrolled. Jim Mulvey, Cutler, is probably the best at what he does, just like Fred. Lori White, who I had asked to have come here, and Lori wrote me this morning, and unfortunately she had a health issue, not major, but I hope she's watching. Lori did extensive work on the PGA Tour. She's directed 3 documentaries on golf. Her credentials include 5 Emmys. I hope that I can come back here next year from Mike and Lori's induction, because Lori's a very worthy candidate. We've also already heard from Jon Cole, my pal, North Dakota Sports Hall of Fame. I mean, how many people have a gymnasium named after them, right? The brother that, from another mother, my man Kaz, 33 years at the same radio station. That's like unheard of. And it was only 33 years because he decided to stop. He still has that incredible following that he had on the radio on his Facebook page, which is so well done and is always a fun read or listen. There are many others, including Brian Kilmeade at Fox News, and Mozer knows a lot more. Spoiler alert, these people that are following me up here are all extremely talented and have very impressive resumes also. In the Bible, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus said, "Nobody lights a lamp and hides it under a basket. Instead, the light is placed on a table and gives light to all who enters the room." The lamp right here on this campus is WCWP. It is a shining beacon of success, hard work, and talent. It would be a shame if that light were hidden under a basket, or worse yet, allowed to go out. When I heard Pete Bellotti say that the health was strong, that's like the best news, other than Gina being here, that I've heard all day. Dan Cox, I cannot thank you enough for all that you did to keep this station up. Not only during COVID, but all the other years. You've had a tremendous impact on many, many lives. And all of us here owe you a big debt of thanks. I also want to thank my fellow alumni and Hall of Fame members like Neil Marks, Lew Scharfberg, Maura Bernard, Bernie, Jeff Kroll, Mike Chimeri, and all the rest of you who love this place and have so tirelessly given your time and talents to WCWP. Last but certainly not least, thank you, Pete Bellotti, for taking the baton from Dan. I'm so grateful to you for doing that, and congratulations again on the new addition to your family. As Mozer reminded us all daily, if you don't promote, one thing happens. Nothing, right, Bill? WCWP needs to be promoted the way the people at Syracuse promote the Newhouse School. The will of the alumni is here. Almost all the people that I've mentioned live here in New York or Connecticut. And in a few months, Kaz and Deb are moving to Delaware. They'll be fairly local, and I will be very glad to fly in and help promote this place and keep the light shining. I am so very grateful for this tremendous honor. Thank you so much.
Hard to keep a dry eye in this place. Thank you, Dan. Our next inductee and inductor are two of my favorite people. One who helped mentor my future, and one that actually gave me a job at one point in my life. I love you both. Suzanne Langwell will be inducted by Bill Mozer. Come on, Mozer, we haven't got all day. I know that. Back time it. You're never going to hit the post on this one, Mozer. You know that, right? Podcasting, have no post. There is no post.
What does this thing do? I only live about 15 minutes away, and I feel underdressed. So if you guys could just wait, I'll be back in about 15 or 20 minutes. This is a little uncomfortable. We're not wearing badges. And people don't know who I am. I'm Bill Mozer. Well, I guess by now you do. I've gotten a little heavier, and my hair is grayer. But I'm actually the Energizer Bunny, because people say, well, how are you? And I go, as long as I take my meds, I'm fine. So why am I here today, or how am I here today, is really, I'm a miracle of modern science. I'm going to violate my own HIPAA. Get it off my chest. Actually, that's not a good idea, because I have a defibrillator up here that's kept me alive. Now, I've gone through 2 major heart attacks. I've had minor heart attacks. I've had stents. I've had ablations. I've had, what else? Cardioversion. And I have a permanent timeshare over at North Shore, Manhasset. So they have a room reserved for me. When I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, I got the grappling hook, so I didn't get a chance to say a lot of the things that I wanted to at the time. And people say to me, well, who's this guy? What's he do? But for those people who want to know a little bit about my career, it started at WCWP like all of you guys. I was fortunate to get my first job in commercial radio. I'm not going to cry. I'm just... Oh,
come on. Please.
My first job in commercial radio was at WTFM, which is the world's first full-time FM stereo station out on the Long Island Expressway. And then I was very fortunate to get picked up by WABC and WPLJ. And I engineered for Cousin Brucey and Dan Ingram and George Michael, sports guys here, George Michael. And when WABC and WPLJ went combo, I went over to the ABC radio network. I was there for a couple of years. And then a friend of mine from ABC said, actually I did some part-time work with Joe Hunterkamp and Bruce Leonard over at the Today Show. But a friend of mine from ABC called me up and he said, Billy, he said, what are you doing? What do you mean, what am I doing? He said, come on over here. We're starting up a new news network called Fox News with Roger Ailes. I said, all right, let's do it. So in 1996, I went over to Fox News and worked with an amazing team of people. Now, I'm going to put this aside for a minute because you really have to hear this. And for those Second Amendment people here, hold your guns. Roger Ailes was an amazing leader. He was an inspiring guy and a prankster. I remember one day that in the middle of the winter, there was a huge protest outside. His office was on the corner, second floor. Huge protest in front of Fox over something. And Roger said to Suzanne Scott, who now runs Fox, Suzanne, count the heads out there. Okay? He said, call up Dunkin' Donuts. And I want coffee and donuts for all these people. This is in the middle of the winter. So Roger, with this big-ass smile on his face, is watching all these people eating Fox donuts and drinking Dunkin' Donuts. That was a great experience. I was there for about 8 years. And then I came back to ABC and worked on a soap opera for 7 years on One Life to Live. And when that folded, because of the expense of producing a soap opera, I went out to work on The Chew with Mario Batali, and then The View, that was a lunacy factory over there. And but after I left ABC, I went to work with Regis Philbin. I never cared for Regis Philbin as a personality on the air. What a delightful man. We did a sports interview show for Fox Sports 1 that nobody watched at 5 o'clock, and that lasted, well, just lasted about a year. Now, I have literally a phone book here of accomplishments. My dear friend, Suzanne Langwell. Let me just depart for a minute. Over the course of years, people have come up to me and they said, you know, you're responsible for my success. And I had to think about that for a bit. No, I'm not responsible for anyone's success. You're responsible for your own success. What I did at WCWP was create an atmosphere where smart people could learn. So I don't take credit for anybody's success. You take credit for your own success. And my pleasure was basically creating an atmosphere, as I say, where people could learn. At Fox, I remember standing next to Scott Ehrlich, who ran the Brain Room, which is a fancy name for their research department. And I'm next to Scott, and he's looking over the Brain Room with all these people doing research. And he said to me, Bill, my success is their success. And I thought about that for a minute. And basically what he was saying is that he didn't take credit. They did the work, and he was successful because of their success. And that, you know, I just cherish that little moment in time. But again, it goes back to you guys. I mean, WCWP is a tribe. It's a family. Marriages and relationships. I mean, this is just an amazing collection of people. And even those that are not here today, it's an extended family of people. It's remarkable. I don't know how unique it is in terms of Long Island University, but it is just, you know, if there's anything that really moves me emotionally is the fact that you guys keep coming back and again, the contacts that you maintain and marriages that have evolved from this. One of the projects that I'm working on, because I want to preserve the history of WCWP, and I have been doing a podcast series called the WCWP Career Path Podcast Series, and I've spoken to, about maybe 7 people so far. Everyone in this room, I'd love to have the opportunity to hear about your success and record it for the history of WCWP. So you can reach out to me at billmozer@gmail.com if I don't reach you first. I mean, it's an enormous project, but it's a lot of fun. And I have Bruce Leonard down in South Carolina editing. So I do the recording and he does the editing. Now let's get to Suzanne Langwell. Geez, I have a phone book here of Suzanne's amazing accomplishments. But first, I got this letter in the mail the other day. It said, Bill, unfortunately, I am unable to officiate at Suzanne Langwell's induction into the WCWP Hall of Fame. Since my dismissal at NBC Universal, I've been living in Costa Rica with Hadley Gamble, former anchor at CNBC. After many years of allegedly harassing her, we finally hooked up. This is despite the NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, NPR, and New York Times fake news reporting. My NBC Golden Parachute is paying me about $3.2 million a week. And thank God I never have to work again for those bastards at Comcast. Please do me a favor. Will you initiate Suzanne into the WCWP Hall of Fame for me? Kindest personal regards, Jeff.
Oh.
All right, let's get to Suzanne. Suzanne said she always wanted to be in radio. And she's unique in the sense that she came to WCWP with actually some extensive high school experience in radio. She grew up in Lake Ronkonkoma and went to Sachem High School, and they had a big radio, 2,000-watt radio station there, WSHR. And so she got her third-class license to work at the high school radio station. You know, everyone came to WCWP, had to go down and take their stupid little 20-question test at the FCC office, which was eventually replaced by your signature on the back of a card. And Suzanne said she was always inspired by listening to WABC. And at WSHR, she said she did tape shifts, played classical music. I mean, she came to WCWP with this vast experience that was, as I say, quite unique for somebody just walking in the door. Eventually, she was a DJ. She did a rock and roll show at the high school station. She did publicity. She coordinated the station dinners. It sounds like WCWP all over again. And she actually did a voiceover for a commercial that unfortunately never aired because the station that was supposed to air it, apparently their transmitter blew up that day.
I'm not a bad luck, son.
It's what?
I'm not a bad luck, son.
Okay. Stop me if I say anything that's out of, that's not accurate here. She said she looked at other colleges and just, you know, nothing really like many people here. You know, they looked around and said, you know, this CW Post thing is a beautiful campus, and the radio station was somewhat attractive. She started at WCWP in 1979 and did a board shift, but, you know, that was nothing new for her. She eventually became a traffic manager. She was a publicity manager. She worked on the program guide, and she had the unique ability and skills to actually sit in for Mrs. G when she was on vacation. That was, you know, nobody could sit in that chair except Suzanne. She was just amazing. She went on to WCTO, where she was an automation engineer, again, playing tapes. And then she was very fortunate to get connected with WABC. She was a phone screener there with Tracy Lozito. I don't know if you know Tracy, but she worked for Art Rush Jr. You sports guys know Art Rush Jr. And Dr. Kuriansky. In 1980, she joined the ABC radio networks and worked over there for a while. And then she moved on to Meadowlands, which was a satellite backhaul system. And she was running client services there. Whoa. I got about 20 more pages here, so, you know, order lunch or a pizza or something. She went on to NBC TV, where she was in the traffic department. And then she later became the supervisor at NBC Skypath. She went over to Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, and she managed their uplink commercials. I've said this before. The most important thing that we do in broadcasting is commercials. It's delivering an audience to an advertiser. Now, of course, we all watch TV or listen to the radio because of the format. But if you had a successful 24-hour polka music format, you were delivering that audience to an advertiser. That's really the dynamic of broadcasting, is delivering an audience to an advertiser. And it's a tremendous responsibility in terms of getting commercials right. You screw up a commercial on a major network, you're talking about lots of money, right?
Yes.
Lots of money.
Yes.
Eventually, she had 26 people reporting to her, which again is a tribute to her leadership. And in December of 2022, she retired. Suzanne is a remarkably talented, resourceful person. It was an honor, really, to have her work at WCWP. And should I write back to Jeff? Suzanne, come on up and get your award.
Thank you so much. Michael, you ready? So sweet.
fall, you break a hip, it'll be funny.
Tell you what, let me lose these stupid glasses.
All right, yeah, let's try it.
Yeah. I lost them.
It's fine. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. Don't step on your glasses.
You know, in case you're not familiar with Mike Chimeri, Mike is the station historian. For years, he's taken photographs and videos of these procedures, and you really, his archives are absolutely amazing. Thank you, Mike. Let me see what you got there. Cool.
Yes, very cool.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you, Bill.
And thank you, Dan, and thank you, Pete Bellotti, for putting this together, and Suzanne for coordinating a lot of this. And let me get my stuff out of here. Suzanne, it's your turn. Okay.
Wow. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. Bill was the second person I met at WCWP. Mrs. G was the first, as I think all of us here can attest to. I know she's looking down on us and very, very happy to see us all here. I am truly honored and humbled to be recognized by my peers and my colleagues. I tried so hard to put some words together. I love to talk. I'm speechless at the moment, but I tried to find my place. I love art, but I'm not an artist. I enjoy sports and the enthusiasm that the sports guys have, but I could take it or leave it. I'll know what the Mets won or not. I just couldn't find my place. And when I found the radio station at WSHR, I found home. And I was looking to find that when I went to college. And I got bit, and I got bit early, and I knew I was going to be in this industry. And I wanted to be at a station where I was going to learn what I needed to do to be successful in my future career. I looked at Hofstra. I thought about Syracuse. And I said, well, why would I go to a station that isn't in the #1 market of the United States? And then I walked into WCWP and I met Mrs. G. I saw the building and I got to meet Bill, who gave me a personal tour throughout the station. As I'm sure he gave everybody who was here during his time a personal tour through the station. And I said, this is a no-brainer. This man works at WABC Radio. He runs the station like a professional station. Why wouldn't I come here? This is where I'm going to learn. And I learned so much because of Bill and because of all of you. I've had the pleasure of working with Mike at WABC Radio. I've had the pleasure of working with Bruce Leonard, with Lew, with so many of you throughout my career, and I'm very, very grateful. I did get the opportunity to meet my husband while I was at NBC, and we had a very wonderful life, and I have 2 wonderful sons that I brought to work often and told them, you don't want to be in this business. Life sucks. You'll never have a holiday at home. And I'm happy to say that they've found their own paths and they've created their own way and they're on their paths to starting their own families, and I'm very, very proud of them. But most of all, I want to thank all of you for being my friends, for being my colleagues, for I was just so shocked. I met more WCWP people at NBC TV, at the NBC TV network, than I had while I had been at WCWP. It's just such an honor and a pleasure. And thank you all very much for being my friend, being my colleagues, and being there for me to teach me all the things that brought me through the career. The one thing I do know, when I got into a position to hire people, I said, Dan, we have so many entry-level jobs at Englewood Cliffs. Can I get some students over here? And unfortunately, we all know that the Port Authority likes to keep raising the prices of the bridge crossings and stuff, and it was just too much money for the kids, and it wasn't as sexy as working in the city, and I get that. I wanted to work in the city too. So what I did was I listened to Dan and I thought about it, and I said, well, there's got to be there's got to be schools and stuff, and one of the things that I'm most proud of is not only learning all the different things that I did and creating and building systems and making things work and making things work seamlessly. My day was when I never, my good day was when I never got a phone call from anybody. And when you handle millions commercials that are worth millions, if not billions worth of dollars, that's a very good day. So what I did is I reached out to a number of schools, Montclair State, Seton Hall, William Patterson, and I had an affinity for the broadcasters and the people that were running those college radio stations. And what I did was I created a meet and greet where I would invite them in and bring seniors in. And, you know, Lou, they still don't like the idea of you cutting class to go to a professional radio station or a professional network. Yeah, one of the first things, and one of the things I always remember and tell people, is I was working part-time at WABC, and Kathy, the morning show producer, was going to go on vacation, and they said, Suzanne, we want you to cover it. And I was a senior in college here at Post, and I successfully did not go to any David Jason classes for my entire 4 years here. But I did have to take Lew Scharfberg's class in cable television. It was either David or you, Lew. And Lew's class was...
I can't play piano.
Lew's class was in the evening, and I was like, well, I'm a senior, I need a job, so I'm gonna take this gig. And I worked with all my professors and talked to them about it. And the professor that gave me the hardest time was, of course, Lew. How could you miss my class for a week? Huh?
I still do.
And you still do, is right. And I was sleeping in the dorm. I was going to bed at 7 o'clock at night in the dorm. And I was getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to take the train from Hicksville into New York City. And I was taking the train with Harry Tucker, a guy from the classical music station at the time, and a couple of other people. So like if that train didn't get into Manhattan, there would have not been any morning radio in New York for that day. But successfully, I was able to do very, very well on your final exam. And
B's and G's, right? Remember
yeah.
B's and G's?
Yeah. But anyway, so the best part about this whole thing was to be able to give back, build programs with other schools, and bring in somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 students from Montclair and other universities into our Englewood Cliffs facility and get them in entry-level jobs and give back. So thank you all for everything. This means the world to me, and it's so much of an honor to be here. Thank you.
At one point in my career, I was one of the people who worked for Suzanne. Great boss.
Thank you.
He was a great boss. No, a terrific person to work with at the station and then in the professional world. The B's and G's was stupid.
Everyone will agree on that.
The next inductee holds a certain part in my life because, as many of you have said, you know, I went to Post and I saw the campus, I saw the radio station. Look, the first person I met at the radio station was Bill Mozer, and he was in those really short running shorts. So I was kind of grossed out from the beginning. Luckily, he ushered me into a studio, and I sat with somebody doing the classical library, which also almost turned me off. But my search didn't start that day. It started weeks before when I was sitting at home, headphones on, long distance radio, you know, an antenna on the roof, trying to find a college radio station in the area that I could go to, because I was an arrogant prick at the time, thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I come upon this radio station, 88.1, and I go, I call my friend Mark and I say, I found out where we're going to school. He said, where? He says, I found the worst fucking radio station on the air. He goes, where? He goes, WCWP in Brookville. He said, where's Brookville? A couple of South Shore kids. We didn't know where Brookville was. Well, we get there, and within a very short period of time, we were fairly successful, Mark and I. Within about 4 months, we were able to create a format that we thought was going to work. And it did. And that's the only reason I think I got the job in the end. He doesn't remember this, but it was the first weekend in February in 1982. He was the first person to say the phrase, rock and roll weekend. And he may not remember that, but as the program director, it was a big day for me. It was a huge day for me. And yeah, we started out slow, but we worked our way into being a juggernaut of a radio station for a period of time. So I'm going to ask JP to come up and induct my good friend, Roger Lucier, or Roger Luce as we know him on the air.
Well, I feel like a bit of a fish out of water. Apparently, I'm the only one who doesn't know Mozer for life. He introduced himself to me over there before. He's like, how's retirement doing? I'm like, yeah, I'm still going at it. With Raj. But I have a little bone to pick with Dan. Dude, this guy's been winning in your backyard for 30 years. It takes 30 years to get 30 years. He was winning in afternoon drive. He's been winning in morning drive for 23 years. He did 20 years as the arena voice of the New York Islanders. And then finally, and then every year the email would come out that they were trying to get the names for the Hall of Fame. And every year he'd be like, I know this is my year. I know this is my year. Only to have disappointment. And then it came in again, and he goes, I heard him, this is my year. I heard him say, I'm good enough. I'm professional enough. And gosh darn it, people like me. Only to be shunned again. But now is your year, Raj. 30 plus years, but I gotta be honest with you. I'm hearing all these speeches, all this talent in the room. 30 years sounds about right. I gotta be honest with you. I congratulate you, my man. My history with Raj goes long before we worked together. I was a kid, I was washing dishes at the Harbor Deli in Huntington. And WBAB was the station everybody listened to. I had the WBAB, Ozzy bumper sticker, Van Halen bumper sticker, Rush, Black Sabbath. They were all in my high school locker. And one of the voices I always listened to was Roger, and I'd be washing dishes at the deli and just hear him. He had this voice of God. And turns out you don't need a voice of God, Exhibit A, to be on the radio. But he had this voice, and he would always start his shows with something about himself. His life, not himself, his life. And it made him, like, you never felt like he was talking to Long Island. I always felt like he was talking to me. And that was just something that, I don't know, I didn't really pay all that much attention to, but he was so good at it that there was one year they were doing BAB was doing the Charity Begins at Home rock marathon that I used to do every year with Billy Joel. And he was, doing what Raj does and making himself, feel like he was he made me feel like he was my best friend, just telling me stuff. I had no money, but he got me to drive to the Sheraton in Smithtown. And I think I was maybe 19, no, I was still in high school, 18 years old, to give the last $10 I had for Charity Begins at Home. Again, I had never met him, but something about it, it felt like my friend was in need, so I went and gave my last $10. And then a couple of years later, I was driving home from a job at BJ's Wholesale Club. It was November, I want to say 91. Raj is on the radio, I'm listening to him, and he says the words, Queen frontman Freddie Mercury has passed away. And I was just like, ugh. But I didn't feel like he was telling all of Long Island that Freddie Mercury had passed away. It felt like he called me and told me Freddie Mercury passed away. And then he went and played The Show Must Go On. And I was like, woof, but it was Raj. And then, years later, I'm a WRHU reject, by the way. I got thrown out of that radio station. Maybe I went the wrong place at the wrong time, but I got thrown out. But I ended up doing an internship at BAB. Now I'm walking into what I think are these hallowed halls. These are the voices that I grew up listening to. Bob Buckman was in mornings, Jerry Martier, Ralph DeTora, Roger Luce was the afternoon guy. And I get hired shortly thereafter, and next thing I know, I'm doing the WBAB Friday afternoon happy hour. Roger is the jock. I'm the promotions guy trying to get the party started. And we bounced around from bar to bar, club to club around Long Island every Friday doing a live broadcast. And I would gather everybody right around 4:20. Never put that together until last couple of years, but it started every Friday at 4:20. And we get everybody together in front of the radio for the primal scream. The whole bar would start screaming, set the tone. Next thing you know, the happy hour is underway. And I would sit next to Raj. And while the music is going, and we would just sit there and laugh. I laughed at him because he was the straightest white guy I had ever, just the straightest soul I had ever met in my life. And I think he laughed at me because he had never been next to somebody so incredibly broken in his entire life. And we laughed. And we had a really good time. And then all of a sudden, mornings opened up. I had been talking to somebody at Atlantic Records to go be an assistant. And then I get pulled into a meeting and saying, we want you to do mornings. And I find out that Roger, they came to him and said, want to do mornings, and what do you want? And he's like, what do you think you need? And he says, I want JP. I think we're very different. We're at different points in our life. I owe you everything for that decision, for fighting for that. Because just because you ask for something on the radio, sure as hell doesn't mean you get it. But they listened to his gut. He had his gut, they listened to his gut, and 23 years later, we're still killing it. We're killing it on Long Island, we're killing it in Tampa, and it's because you are just the consummate. And let me tell you something, the yin to my yang, because I'm an absolute lunatic, and he is the voice of calm. And Susan, I know you can agree to this. When he stays calm, do you not want to strangle him? Like, he just stays so cool. We can be fighting with management about contracts and all this stuff, and I want to light the building on fire. He's like, listen, man, it's just business. It's just business. We'll be calm. Everything is cool. And I'm like, shut up! Fight the fight. Get in the game. But, you know, he followed his gut, and the show took off. We made our bones with 9/11. And 9/11, realized we make D jokes for a living most of the time. And then 9/11 came, and we had to be grown-ups. And I wasn't qualified to be a grown-up. I'm still not. But he was, and he knew exactly what we needed to do. And we did it. We went from playing, you know, we play rock and roll music in the morning. We play, you know, Van Halen and AC/DC and Rush and all that stuff. And then we had to, like I said, be grown-ups. And we just went full talk for, a couple weeks straight in a row, and all we did was take phone calls, and he knew it. He knew exactly what we needed to do. He is the backbone to the success that we've had. There's no question about it. Yes, we work very well together, but we follow his gut. I know I follow his gut. I wish I had that same gut. I do not, because like I said, broken, completely broken. He's taught me more about life outside of radio than most people have. He taught me how important. He comes from a big family and how important family is. This man, Susan, his kids, Courtney and Kelly, are his everything. And I mean his everything, to the point where before the kids were born, this dude, who like I said was the straightest guy, shows up at one of the Friday afternoon happy hours wearing a beeper. And I'm like, is he selling drugs? I thought maybe he was venturing out. He's like, no, man, Susan's pregnant. I'm going to have my first. And like every day he would just check that beeper. And next thing you know, and once he was a father, he was complete. And when he had his second child, he was even more complete. And now he just married one of those little girls off. And it's crazy that I was sitting here watching this whole thing happen. I'm like, wow, I just got real old real fast. But the good news is he's older than me, so that's cool. So listen, Raj, I congratulate you. I still don't know what the hell took these people 30 years to let you into this Hall of Fame, but I can tell you, just like our audiences on Long Island and in Tampa, this Hall of Fame is really lucky to have a human being like Roger Luce in its Hall of Fame, Roger Lucier. So it is my pleasure to induct you into the WCWP Hall of Fame. My partner.
You know, I never know what he's going to say. That worked out okay, though. Thank you. Thank you, Pete Bellotti, being in touch, answering my questions, and I can feel you're the heartbeat right now. It's good. Thank you, Dan. When he came over to CWP, we were like, all right, who's this long hair with Mark Snyder? They both have long hair from Farmingdale, whatever. They come in with their ideas. We're doing Music Weekend, and they're going to blow it up. Oh, we're going to play Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. Cool. So we started, and Music Weekend became Rock and Roll Weekend, and we did heavy metal, and we had a flying V guitar for a logo, and it was amazing. And it was just the most fun radio, and I learned so much here. But the fun, thank you for that. And still being friends is always good to be in touch with you. And thank you, JP, for the kind words. I appreciate it. So before the 23 years of morning drive at BAB and the last 8 doing talk radio in Tampa, and before the afternoon drive for 10 years, and before 6 years of overnights and research director, my foundation for all of that was here, WCWP, everything. And it's amazing to me, looking back, since starting at BAB in '84, that was the tail end of when I graduated here. So everything from here literally brought me 3 internships, PLJ, MJI, syndicators, and then BAB. And I was at BAB for about a month, and they asked me for an audition tape, which I obviously had from Rock and Roll Weekend. And they loved that I said Don Dokken and the Boys when I backsold Dokken. And they were like, listen, we want to have you come on to BAB. And I was given the job for $450, and I was like, $450? I can pay off my student loans. I don't have to do work study. He meant $450 an hour. I thought he meant $450 a week. I was going to this iconic radio station in my head. I thought that's what it was. So CWP has always been, has such a big place in my heart. I'm thankful for the skills I learned, and through the wisdom of Bill Mozer, I walked in 2 days before class, and I came here for the same reason a lot of you did, was because you could get on the air, touch the equipment, and that building. And I was like, this is where I got to go. I thought I was going to Ithaca. Then I thought Hofstra. And nope, this is the place. And I felt it too when I walked in. And I said to Bill, I said, I'll empty the garbage. That's what he told me to say. What should I do? And Bill's like, you don't have to empty the garbage. The smile you all talk about. And he's like, I'm going to put you as the intern with Jim Cutler, Jim Mulvey, and get your work study here. And so I had all my hours at this radio station. And in the first semester, Jim Mulvey taught me everything. Unbelievable. He taught me how to make an audition tape, how to dress for an interview, how to conduct yourself, how to speak, how to say WCWP, how to not pop your P's all the time. And it was from the wisdom of Bill pairing me with Jim. And then Jim's, I mean, he was the youngest guy who knew the most stuff about radio ever, and now is the voice of everything in this country. So I come from good stock, and it really comes from here. So I'm very proud of being part of WCWP, and then the format we did, heavy metal and hard rock, and we were right on the cutting edge. And the first Metallica thousands of people ever heard came out of that tower, and now Metallica is the #2 American band ever. And that's the first time they ever heard it. We played that at a station in San Jose, and that was it. They were the 2 stations in this country. And so this 150-watt flamethrower would hit Mahopac and the Bronx and Hicksville. And we tested the edges of this, and we had people driving into the signal so they could listen to us on Saturday and Sunday and listen to the music we played, because we were that much on the wave of the cutting edge of heavy metal and then what became hair bands through the 80s. So that was an amazing thing to be part of, pushing the envelope at WCWP, where I also did tape shifts and played classical music for an hour at a time, but we flipped it on the weekends. It was really cool. So being here today, it's been amazing to hear the stories, how many WCWP alumni have long, solid careers. When I first walked in, I saw Dan Reagan, and as a freshman, Dan and Freddie were the guys. And I knew that from the very beginning. I knew they ran sports, I knew they ran the whole place, basically, is how I felt as a freshman. So when I walked in, I said, oh, Dan Reagan, hi, how are you? And I know in his head he's thinking, I don't know who you are. He's looking at me, and he was very kind. And I just said hello, and I didn't get to explain that, but man, that's who I am. I was just a freshman kid who saw you, and I knew you went to Sports Channel, and Freddie, I knew you went on, and you were like the first guy hired at ESPN or something, and then you guys went on, and I constantly see your names in the credits of things, and I always remember you guys being the cool seniors and me being the geeky freshman and knowing you were there. So that's my first impression is these two guys, and you know the careers they've had, you heard. And then my roommate was Steve Torrey, who for decades was on 1010 Win Sports and now is at Mad Dog Sports, if I'm not mistaken. Brian Kilmeade was here and wanted to be David Letterman, and now of course he's on mornings on Fox News. Mike Maimone was doing Post Serial, and every time I'd hear Rush Limbaugh go, Maimone or Mike, I'd think of this guy right here in Post Serial. And it always makes me smile. Jeff Jensen doing traffic on CBS AM was also part of our crew. So, and of course I mentioned Jim Mulvey and John Mullen. I mean, so many great people, and we do have quite a legacy here at WCWP, and I'm very proud of it. And all under the leadership of Bill Mozer, who set that standard. So I appreciate your standard that you set to this day. I appreciate doing the air shift where he lifted up the board as the music was playing. Lifted up the board with the pots on it, where I gotta bring up the music and things. And it's facing me like this. And he says, I just have to solder something. And Metallica's playing, and he's soldering in the middle of my shift. And I said, Bill, I have to do a segue. He says, yeah. All right, so I look underneath and I hit the record and I'm sliding the stuff under here I can barely see while he solders away in the middle of my shift. But you know what? It taught me to work under pressure. It taught me to deal with everything around me and still make believe like nothing was going on. And that's where I get that from. So Bill, I appreciate how you ran things. I thank you for that experience from day one, actually minus 2 days of my freshman times at WCWP. So it goes without saying that radio and TV, and Suzanne and several people have mentioned this, it's not an easy career and not an easy business to be in, a lot of ups and downs, but I thank my awesome wife Susan for supporting me the whole way. I'm stuck. Yeah, she's it. Also, I wouldn't be in radio if I didn't go to Connecticut School of Broadcasting. That's like I almost kind of keep it quiet. But when I was a high school kid, they had the first class ever. I was in Connecticut for Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and my mom said, you like music so much. I play guitar 3 hours a day and listen to music all the time, and I love radio. And she's like, maybe you should try it if you're thinking about, if you think about radio. I was like, that's kind of cool. So I tried it, and I was like, I got the bug. And that's how I ended up here. So to my mom and dad watching on the stream in North Carolina, thank you. And thanks to JP, my radio and ratings partner, for 23 years, Brett Fumara, our producer, for the absolute best years of the Roger and JP show. Thank you, Brett. You guys make the job very fun. And thank you to our general manager, Caitlin, who's here with her husband, Jim, for being here today, driving from God's country out east. We appreciate you, and I appreciate you being here. And my brother-in-law, Neil, who works at ABC, and my sister, Christine, who had to listen to me cranking up Metallica, Kiss, and Ted Nugent through the bedroom wall. They heard it. WCWP, obviously, looking at this room, a great tradition of radio and TV people with talent. I'm humbled to work with you and to be among all of you, and I'm humbled by this award. I love this place. Thank you.
All right, we're coming down to the end, but I would hope you would stay at least a few minutes after the last inductee finishes, because I have a few remarks I need to make before we leave. Last one is me. I get to induct somebody, another person. And, John spoke about it earlier. I had a professional career at NBC Television. I also taught high school for about 9 years. was in New York for a while. I worked with Suzanne. Actually worked with her in New Jersey. Do you remember the Beijing Olympic Games? You booked $1 billion and we had what, 99.9%? We didn't have to make good in that entire, that was a very proud moment for you and your staff at that time. I remember that. They gave us t-shirts. I thought it was a little cheap to just give us t-shirts for booking $1 billion. Go figure, you know. It was a very nice night. I still wash my car with it. So anyway, you know, for me, to have one of my students, someone from my era, my 20-year span as the director of broadcasting, that means a lot. It means a lot. And it means a lot especially for this individual. Because we've heard all these stories today about how you got to where you are. And I tell you, this guy took the long route. He took the route that he needed to take to get where he needed to go. So I'm going to read a little because I'll just get flustered a little. Travis Demers was the WCWP sports director for 3 years. Before I got the job there permanently, he was already sports director. You have to understand, in the 1990s, between the time that Bill left and I came, the sports department had died, had gone away. Sports didn't really exist for very much of that decade. And it was disgusting. And he did play-by-play for WCWP. For football, well, you did it for the web station, I think, initially, right? Okay, well, here's where the story comes in. He did it for football, men's, women's basketball, baseball, and lacrosse. He did it on the web station, which was new. And not really, it was new technology. Nobody was listening to radio stations on the web at that time. And I'm going to tell, I don't know if I ever told Travis this story. I haven't told anybody this story as far as I know. When I was negotiating to become the director of broadcasting to replace Judy Kramer, I had to meet with this guy named Wally Smith. Now, Travis just nodded his head. Wally Smith was the guy who ran WPBX, which became WLIU in Southampton, and he was the designated person to run the radio stations for LIU. We were sitting in Studio 2, and I said to him, I said, sports goes on FM. Because we were arguing at that time, if you remember. It was a troubled time at WCWP. All the students were being taken off the air, and all the community volunteers were being taken off the air in favor of importing the WLIU signal from Southampton. And I said, sports is going to be on FM. And he said, well, you know, we really can't do that. I need consistency in the programming. Think of a few expletives I have in my mind right now. I didn't say it, because we're negotiating. I was happy with the money, I was happy with the stuff. But he said, I said to him, but football has to be on FM. It has to be on FM. Every Saturday in the fall, football has got to be on FM. It's our most popular sport, and it's listened to by most people. He looked at me and says, no. And I stood up, left the room. And he came and got me in the lobby. He said, that's a deal breaker? I said, damn right, that's a deal breaker. WCWP Sports Department was very, very important to me. As the guy who ran Rock and Roll Weekend, that sounds pretty odd. But without sports as a foundation, in my opinion, no radio station succeeds. A college radio station succeeds. Because you draw them in, and then we play all our promos during the football game, and hopefully they listen to the other things that we do. So he gets me, he goes, that's going to be a deal breaker? I said, yes. He says, if I don't have football on FM every Saturday, I don't want the job. He caved. Thank God. I was about to be out of a job with 3 or 4 kids, you know. But it was important to me. And it was important to Travis, too, because Travis now got to do things that he wasn't going to be able to do. Because when I first met Travis, and his energy and his drive was contagious. I could feel that this guy was going to have success. He did sports talk. He did PTV, right? He did a video show. We reintroduced Sports Chatter during that period too. We brought Sports Chatter back on the air. We were doing it 5 nights a week, which for a while, which was pretty cool. But the battle for FM airtime was a struggle, but we held on to as much as we could. Professionally, Travis is currently the play-by-play announcer for the Portland Trail Blazers in the NBA. Now, you have to correct me here. How many people have held that position, Travis? 4. 4. In their history as a team, he's the 4th person to hold that position. That's freaking awesome. And now the boring stuff, you know, he had an afternoon drive time show on the Trailblazers flagship, Rip City Radio 620 in Portland, where he was still there for the last 8 years?
I left last summer.
Last summer, when this started to build. Prior to working in Rip City, he was with Sirius XM for a little while as a host. He did 1080 The Fan in Portland as a midday host for a while. And in the beginning, he did play-by-play for Major League Baseball, Minor League Baseball, the Hillsborough Hops, the University of Portland Pilots, National Lacrosse League. I remember those days. They used to call me there those days. And the Portland Lumberjacks. Okay. Many high school state championship events in the state of Oregon. He's also aired on the Oregon Ducks, Oregon State Beavers, and Portland State Vikings. So why am I doing this in this order? Why am I going backwards? Why am I doing this way? I want to show you that how he built from doing high school championship games to being the guy who calls Portland games. And for over a decade, you were at NBC Sports Northwest, which folded recently, last year. So when Travis was a student, he and I would talk about how he was going to become a professional play-by-play announcer. And at the time, I told him, you may have to start small, some small city in the middle of nowhere. You know, calling any sport that they'd hire you to do. What was your first game? $70, $25 to call a high school lacrosse? $50 to call a high school lacrosse game. As one of my first students, and that I would have the honor to work at WCWP with, Travis was a standout. He was one of those people. You know, I had a student one time tell me the reason she didn't cry at a meeting when she got yelled at Westwood One was because you didn't work for Dan Cox. I was tough. If I'm tough on you, it's because I think you have talent. And I was always tough on Travis. And when I think you've got talent and you succeed, it makes me look like a genius. So, and while all of this stuff is impressive, a very impressive career, I'm very proud, extraordinarily proud of all these accomplishments. From what I can tell, Travis has become a proud father with a beautiful wife and 2 amazing kids. The GOAT Michael Jordan once said, if you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it. Travis never allowed a wall to stand in his way. He never climbed it. He broke right through it.
Like the white man?
I am proud and a little verklempt to induct Travis Demers into the WCWP.
Oh, you're right over. Sorry.
Nice shirt, man. Good color. Listen, I was a pioneer for 35 years.
Thank you, Dan. You know, listening to everybody come up here before me, some of the names and the people that were up here, whether it be Dan or Fred, Cosmo, John, Steve Torrey, who was mentioned, when I was going here, your names were ghosts because you were the legends that were here before I was and the names that I was told to be like. And to be here on the same stage and be here inducted with some of you and talking on the same stage as some of you, it means a lot to me. There is no question that I wouldn't be anywhere without WCWP where I am in life. I wouldn't have my job, I wouldn't have my family, I wouldn't be literally living my dream every day if it wasn't for WCWP. And it's interesting because Dan talked about the 90s. The 80s were awesome, right? I see all these people coming up from the 80s. I wish I was here in the 80s. That was incredible. The 90s, not so much. When we got into the 2000s a little bit, that's when things started to pick up again. I got to WCWP my second semester freshman year, so the spring of 2000. When I came to Post, it was because, number one, I was going to play baseball, right? Because clearly that worked out. And I was going to do TV. I came here because I wanted to be a broadcasting major, and that was an option. And I didn't really know much about WCWP because nobody cared. Nobody really cared about the radio station. I didn't even know there was a radio station, and I took a tour of the radio station when I came here on my class tour when I was a senior in high school. It just didn't register because nobody cared. And radio was something that I was always interested in. You know, sports, radio, being a play-by-play announcer, doing something with that, it's what I always wanted to do. And you know, I grew up listening to sports radio. My parents made me turn off the TV at night. You know, the one moment that I remember watching the radio like it was, 1937, Game 7, 1994 Eastern Conference Finals, Rangers Devils. It was a Saturday night. My parents made me turn the TV off after regulation. It's Game 7. You're making me turn the TV off. I was 12 years old. I had baseball tryouts the next morning, and I sat and I watched the radio and listened to Howie Rose call Stephane Matteau's double overtime goal. And I still get chills when I think about that, because that's kind of the moment for me that I wanted to do play-by-play on the radio. And when I got here, that wasn't a thing. So I started working over at PTV, and I really don't remember what it was that made me go over to WCWP one day, but I did, and there was no sports. And I'm thinking, okay, radio's cool, but I like sports. That's what I want to do. Why am I here if there's no sports? So through my spring semester freshman year, I did a music show. I really don't even remember what it was. And I had talked to Dr. Kramer, who at the time was the station manager, and basically begged her to do play-by-play. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to prepare for a game. I had no idea how to do anything at all. And as my wife, I'm sure, will attest to, I can figure it out. I can do it. Just about everything that I don't know how to do, I can figure it out. There was WCWP FM, and then there was this new shiny web radio WCWP, because clearly in 2000, streaming radio was really big. You had to download this real audio player, is what it was called, and it would buffer, play for like 4 seconds, and then buffer some more, and then stop working. So there really weren't many people that were listening. But I did play-by-play that year. I started with the second game of the season. The first game was an away game, and we didn't go to that. And I figured it out along the way. And I had a couple of different guys working with me, and I'll get to that in a minute. But that was really the first taste that I got. And the very first play of the very first game against UMass Lowell was a kickoff that was returned for a touchdown. And you can't make out an audible word from me or from the guy that I was working with that day, Lenny Price, because we were just yelling. Because we'd never done it before. I had absolutely no idea what we were doing. And then we did that for a couple of more years and I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody that was there in charge, but there really wasn't a whole lot of leadership. That's not what WCWP was. So when I hear the stories of the tape room and all these things that you all had to do to cut your teeth to make it to be on the air, I didn't experience that. What I experienced was an FM radio station that students weren't allowed to be on, and a web radio station that was either used for, your class project was to have a radio show, or, oh, you want to do that? Okay, go. There's no direction. There was no learning. There was just figure it out on your own. And then, my junior year, we were kind of told towards the end of the year that there was going to be a leadership change, and Dan Cox was going to come aboard. Now, I didn't know Dan. Dan was, a professor over with PTV for a while, and I worked at PTV. I actually was on the air as a freshman doing a sports talk show. It was just god-awful. And I had just kind of seen Dan from afar, and my impression of him wasn't great. It's like, that guy's kind of a dick. I don't want to work with him. My language, it was kind of true. So, Dan takes over at the end of my junior year, and immediately we hit it off. He knew what I wanted to do. He knew where I wanted to go. He knew where I wanted to be. And from the beginning, we had a great relationship almost instantly. And to his point, and I wrote a bunch of stuff down, and I haven't gotten to any of that. I don't know if I will. But for the 20 years that Dan was here, he is responsible for turning around WCWP and putting it back on the track that it is now. And it sounds like since then, there have been a couple of times where there have been ebbs and flows, and and the student turnout. The pandemic obviously changed some things, and just a fantastic job by the crew that's been there the last few years to bring WCWP back to where it is. But without you, Dan, I don't know that it even gets to that point. Because when I got there, there was no students on FM. And by the time that I graduated, there was nightly news every night. We had football and basketball on FM. We had sports talk shows on FM. And there was that whole struggle in like 2001-ish, 2002, of trying to get students back on FM. And it was a big deal. And I'm so glad that you fought for that. And there were alumni coming in often. They would have meetings. And what was the big room? What was that? Studio 3. There was one night where we were doing an FM sports talk show. It was me and Billy Houst. And we were doing a sports talk show, and the alumni was having a meeting in Studio 3. And Billy's talking something about the NHL trade, something. And I'm sitting at the board. And I spit around in my chair, and there's a drink there, and I knock over the drink. And into the microphone, not really paying attention, there's a microphone, I said, "Oh, fudge." Only I didn't say fudge. And I see every single alumni, because the station is being played in Studio 3, turn and go. That's the only time that I've ever said something on the radio like that. That was a very good learning experience. So 20 plus years later, I apologize for that. But the alumni that came back and kept coming back and wanted to fight for that, it's the perfect explanation of why we're all here. Because everybody in this room cares about WCWP. And I remember my first fall when I was doing football in the fall of 2000, the alumni would come back. And Jeff and Neil would come back and do the football games, and Bernie was here, and there were all these people that had graduated and they'd been gone for 20 years, and they're coming back and they want to be a part of the station. And my first thought was, why are these people here? Because I didn't have that same affinity at that point for the radio station, because really nobody cared all that much. And that was really the first moment to me that WCWP stood out. It's like, okay, this is a place that I want to be, that this is a really important place. And it turned out that WCWP is one of the most important 3+ years that I've ever had. And I owe a lot to Dan, to WCWP, to everybody that I worked with, and all the alumni that kept coming back. Because it showed me just how important things were. And a lot of folks that didn't work in radio, and a lot of folks that just wanted to be there and see people that they hadn't seen in a long time. And now I'm in a phase 20 years after I graduated that, yes, I live far away and I don't get to come back. I haven't been back in about 15 years, but there's no place that I would rather be. And without my experience at WCWP, without working with Dan, I wouldn't be here. There is somebody else that isn't here that I would like to mention, that's Joe Manfredi. Before Dan, Joe was the guy who was really hard on me. I don't think I've ever properly shared with Joe just how much of an influence he had on me. He had some things he was very passionate about that everybody knew. Batman, Bon Jovi, and radio. And Joe had us all believing that he knew everything about all of those topics. We believed it, maybe he did. The point is that we could trust Joe. And he cared about the station, he cared about us, and like I said, he was really hard on me, and there were some times where I resented him for it, and I got frustrated like any 19, 20-year-old punk would. You kind of had this feeling that you were never going to be quite good enough. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful, because it motivated us, and he knew how to motivate us. And when you finally did get to that point, he made sure that you knew it, and you made yourself proud, and you made him proud. I wanted to make him proud of me. So thank you, Joe, if you're watching or someday watching or not. You didn't let me coast, and you're a big reason why I have the work ethic that I have today. Now with Dan, when Dan took over, and I apologize if I'm going long, I have no idea how long this is going. Also, this has been a pretty long afternoon, so thank you all for sticking around. We've all been to those school recitals where like your kid's going at the end and the parents leave like after their kids go. They're like, hey, I can listen to your kid. You know, so thank you for sticking around. So my wife is saying, hey, I had to listen to your husband. But really, another thing too, is I'm going around and around. I was over there a few minutes ago and Dan said, hey, you're last, this is a long day. I don't see it that way because I get to hear stories from people that I've heard so much about, and I get to hear about their path, and I get to hear about them, and that means a lot to me to be up here with so many of you that have great stories that I want to hear about, and I'd love to chat with you more and hear more about them. But when Dan took over, he empowered us, and he changed the station to run more like it did when Bill Mozer was running things. It ran like a commercial radio station. Everybody had a job. Everybody knew what their job was, everybody knew what their role was, and people executed those roles, and they wanted to be there. And as much as I talk about those things, and I haven't really talked about my classmates and my friends, that was the most important thing that I take away from WCWP than anything, is the people that I work with. I worked with a number of people doing radio broadcasts. First it was Greg Schultz, then it was Glenn Larson, then Billy. Mike Pettiford worked with us doing sidelines. And I'll let him tell you, if you ever see him, what he called himself as our sideline reporter. I don't know if you remember that, Dan. And it's something I don't want to say on a hot microphone. It was funny. And I built great relationships. When I first moved out to Oregon, Mike drove with me and then flew back. So I didn't have to drive out 3,000 miles to a place I'd never been before by myself. We had Joe Sacco, who when I would come back on Saturday nights from doing a football game, he'd be in there doing his punk music show on web radio, and by the time my senior year rolled around, his junior year, he was the news director from a guy that was a punk rock music guy. And that was the last thing I would ever expect him to be, was a news guy. He was a damn good news guy. And Erica Soto, and of course, Jay Marabli. Now, I don't know many 19, 20, 21-year-olds around the turn of the century that were into disco and funk, but he was the disco and funk king. And I always thought it was a little weird, but he owned it, and he was awesome at it. And he sent me a message the other day, apologizing that he couldn't make it, but Jay is Jay. He's one of a kind. I also want to make mention of someone who's no longer with us, and that's Sean O'Brien. Sean was either a year or 2 years younger than me. And he's the only person that I've ever met that loves the Yankees more than I do. And he was a big part of the behind-the-scenes stuff with the sports department. He wasn't an on-air guy, and he knew it. Even though he tried, he worked his rear end off. And I wish he could be here with us, because Sean was a great human being. And I loved Sean. I was very sad to hear about his passing a couple years ago. Jen Domino, who ran what did he call it, the urban department? I don't even know what that means. What is urban, whatever. That's what she did. She was fantastic at it. And Joe Conti and all the people that I was with at those times. But what I remember most about those times is the Friday mornings that we would all get together at WCWP and just hang out and do nothing. And Dan would sit with us, and we would get lunch, we would get joints, pizza or Chinese or something like that. And by mornings, I mean like noon, 12:30, 1 o'clock, something like that, because we all probably didn't feel very good from the night before. But those were the best times. And working with those people before Dan got there, we kind of built our own camaraderie together before the station started to turn around. And I think those are some of the things that helped get it back on track, is that we cared so much about it. We sat there through 9/11. The next day, everybody was sent to their dorm rooms or sent back home or wherever they were. And we sat in our rooms and watched everything the next day. The next few days, we were all at WCWP. And we didn't move for days. That was a Tuesday morning. 2 days later, the wind shifted and started blowing everything east, and we could smell what was happening at Ground Zero. And we were there together, and we lifted each other up. And those kinds of things, those are special things that, I hold very, very near and dear to my heart, because I love those people, even though I don't see them or talk to them much. I've been really lucky in my professional life, maybe luck's not the right word, fortunate is a better word, blessed. The things that Dan has talked about that I did. I get to be the radio voice of the Portland Trailblazers, which is, I can't even put into words what that means to me, because it's literally what I wanted to do since I was 12 years old. The original voice of the Trailblazers is a man named Bill Shawn. He passed away a few months ago. He's 93 years old. I didn't know who he was before I got to Portland, but he is the most famous broadcaster in Oregon, ever. He was the original voice of the Trailblazers in 1970. He coined the phrase Rip City. Just happened to on a random basket by Jim Barnett in the first year of the Trailblazers. He made a basket and he said Rip City. It became a thing. And now it literally says Rip City on the jerseys. The radio station the Trailblazers are on is called Rip City Radio for him. I got to know him pretty well the last couple of years before he passed away. And being able to get to know somebody like that, who is a broadcasting legend, that doesn't happen without my start here. I've called a Game 7 in the NBA playoffs. I've called the longest playoff game in NBA history, a 4-overtime game against the Denver Nuggets in 2019. I got to call Damian Lillard's 71-point game back in February. I mean, these are things that like, you can't write down that I want to do this and then actually go do it. None of this happens without starting at WCWP. None of it. And I can't imagine somebody better than Pete Bellotti to take WCWP into the next generation. I have to thank my wife, who, as this was going on today, and so many of you thank your spouses. She leans over and she said, "You're not going to gush about me, are you?" Yeah, I am. My wife, Hannah, this is the second time in her life that she's ever been to New York. She's Georgia-born, Oregon-raised. This is her first time ever on Long Island, so she's experiencing some new accents and things like that. This is definitely outside her comfort zone, so thank you for being here. We've been blessed with two beautiful boys. Lincoln turned 5 a couple weeks ago. Lincoln Abbott for Jim Abbott. So, by the way, thank you for letting me choose our kids' middle names. And then Lawson Mantle. I'm sure you can figure out where I got that. She chose Griffey for her dog. But she spends a lot of time without me during the season. I travel a lot, obviously. Sometimes I'm gone for 10, 11 days, and then I come home and I have the second night of a back-to-back. Our family wouldn't function without you. So thank you for understanding and being there and basically taking care of our family and being the rock for our family. I love you. Lastly, and I actually haven't read any of this, and I've taken up way too much time, for the next generation of students coming through WCWP, and I've gotten to know a couple of them. Been doing a weekly hit with Andrew on the Shark Tank, Sports Shark Tank, and it means a lot to me that you guys would want me on your show to talk basketball or talk whatever. And you know, when I was a student, I was kind of scared to reach out to the ghosts I referred to before, because guys like Dan and Fred and Steve Torrey, who I eventually worked with at Sirius XM, like, you guys are intimidating to a 19, 20-year-old kid with you know, the big time jobs and the big names. It says a lot about you guys to reach out to me and have me on it. It means a lot that I can still kind of be a part of WCWP a little bit, but make the most out of your time here and learn to do everything that you possibly can, because it will come in handy. But most importantly, take care of the people around you. You've heard the stories today that's what people remember more than anything else. Yeah, the air shifts and all the things that put you on the career path wherever you are, but the people around you, they're gonna be with you for a long time. Some are gonna be like family to you. Some you might not see for 15 years, and then when you see them, it's gonna feel just like it did back then. Take care of the people around you and love them, and they're gonna love you too. They're gonna be here no matter how long it's been. So thank you. This is truly one of the biggest honors and most special things in my life. So thank you for letting me get up here and blab. Everybody knows I talk too much, just ask my wife. Thank you. To the tribe, I love you all.